Once the New York Times created this political scandal, my mugshot and Efraim's mugshot were on the front page of the New York Times next to a picture of rusty-looking ammunition.
What are the thoughts that are going through your head when you're dealing with this whole process?
I might be fucked. That's what I'm thinking.
Today, we have a truly extraordinary guest, a man whose life story reads like a Hollywood screenplay but is entirely, unbelievably true. David isn't just another entrepreneur. From a young arms dealer who once navigated the high-stakes world of international munitions to becoming the innovative CEO of a music technology company.
The United States was fighting the Taliban. That was where most of the stuff I worked on went. I didn't feel bad about that. I thought Taliban are not great people and the people fighting them should be supported. First thing everyone asks me is, was the Triangle of Death scene real? So the Triangle of Death scene was based on a real contract. We did have a contract to deliver 10,000 Berettas to Iraq. Unfortunately, we actually failed to deliver those Berettas in real life. House arrest turned out to be one of the biggest blessings in my life. That was how I launched my company, Singular Sound. That's kind of funny how that goes. Every single industry has its own quirks. If you have a specialty, just start with that. It'll work out. Don't stress too much. You can make more money. You can never make more time.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot has been a huge supporter of the show, and I'm happy they are because I'm a huge believer in HubSpot. I've used it for everything from this show to all the companies I've ever run in the past. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. And let me ask you a question. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to figure out marketing. Either you're doing it yourself or you have a team. And do you ever feel like your marketing team is just running from fire to fire, creating endless content, launching campaigns, generating leads, scoring them, nurturing them, and just when you put out that one fire, 3 more pop up? These days, marketers have never been more spread thin. That's where HubSpot and its new built-in AI assistant, Breeze, come in. When you combine the power of Marketing Hub and Content Hub, every quarter can be your best quarter. Imagine AI that instantly remixes your content for any channel, smart lead scoring that automatically spotlights your hottest prospects, and an AI-powered analytics suite that puts all your KPIs in one place. Plus, AI co-pilots and agents that handle those time-consuming tasks that you've been juggling. Stop spreading yourself thin. Marketing is tough enough. Building a business is tough enough. Stop putting out fires. Start making major moves with HubSpot. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to learn more. Talk to me about some like the first entrepreneurial endeavors, businesses, things that you tried to do growing up. I think it's a good place to start.
Let's see. My first entrepreneurial venture was when I was 6 years old. I was living in Israel at the time, in Jerusalem, and I'm one of 9 children. My dad was a rabbi and a very religious household, and we lived in this old apartment building that didn't have an elevator. And it didn't have a garbage chute either. So you'd have to take your trash, down the stairs to the ground floor, out to the dumpster on the corner, and then haul it into the dumpster. And as a little kid, the dumpster was really big, so I'd have to like swing it and get it and sometimes miss, and you have to do it again. And so anyway, it was a big pain in the...
Your dad worked you as a...
Yeah, he really did. He really put us to work. So I remember there was one day, I was playing Legos with my older sister. And my mother, who was like cooking in the kitchen, she asked us to take the trash out. And we, as a little kid, my sister was like a year and a half older than me, so she was about 7. And she asked us to take the trash out, and we're like, oh, we don't want to take the trash out. We want to play Legos. And she got annoyed at us, and she's like, I asked you to take the trash out. My dad hears the commotion. He comes by, and she's like, they don't want to take the trash out. And my dad says to us, he's like, you guys are looking at this all wrong. You think this is this big hassle, but really this is a big opportunity for you. And we're like, what are you talking about? How's taking the trash out an opportunity? And he says, well, think about it. All our neighbors, I bet they don't want to take the trash out either. So all you have to do is go to all the neighbors and offer them a service. You can take out their trash. People don't take out the trash every day. So every other day, maybe 3 times a week. And you could charge them, I don't know, maybe, a quarter a week. It was a shekel in Israel. It's worth about a quarter. And we're like, oh, that's a great idea. We're going to make money. And he's like, yeah, it is a great idea. Well, now why don't you practice and take your mother's trash out?
Your dad's smart.
He's very smart. And so we went to all the neighbors and we offered them the service. And I think we signed up 8 neighbors for the service. And we used our mother's, like she had a big, like this big cart, this like wire cart that I think she would put groceries in or something. And we'd have to, you know, put the trash in the thing because we were too small to like take the trash out just on its own. And we'd have to like take the cart down the stairs and go ka-chunk, 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 you know, the wheels down the stairs. And then at the end of the week, we went to our dad and we're like, you know, this is way too much work. This is so much work. It's not worth $0.25 a week. And my dad said, well, what if you got paid twice as much? Would you want to do it then? And we're like, well, twice the money. That would be worth it. And he says to us, he was like, well, then just tell the neighbors that you raised the price. And now it's 50 cents a week. And we said, but we can't tell them, we can't just double the price. We just said a week ago it was $0.25. And he says, well, if you don't raise the price, you're going to quit anyway. So you might as well give them the opportunity to pay what, you know, what you think is worth to do the service for. And so we went to all the neighbors. And we had one neighbor who only one neighbor canceled. And from then on, we saw their daughter take out the trash, which we'd never seen before. So I guess they realized, why are we paying the neighbors' kids to do this? We have a perfectly good kid of our own. And one neighbor complained. He's like, what the? You can't just double the price. Maybe this week you put it up 10 cents. Next week you put it up 5 cents. Double, this is crazy, you know? And we're like, oh, but we stuck to our guns. And he's like, okay, fine. And he paid it. And so that was my first business. I built up probably like a few hundred shekels over the course of a few.
How old were you again, sir? When you...
I was about 6 years old.
This is
Yeah.
like from the get-go.
Yeah.
And your dad was a rabbi, so
He was a rabbi.
very, very religious.
Yeah.
But when I listen to your sort of your origin story, you can talk about why you chose not to become religious and sort of like go down that path. But also, he wanted you to become religious, and when you said like, listen, this is not for me, he pushed you towards like more traditional, like safer careers. And I'm curious why. Why would a parent at a young age who can encourage you to be so entrepreneurial, then when it actually comes time to like figure out your life and career, why is he like, go be a doctor or a lawyer?
I think there's a large element in the Jewish community of like traditional, safe
Career
paths. Yeah, there's a lot of doctors are Jewish, a lot of lawyers are Jewish. And I think there's just a large element of, I think the history of the Jewish people is that, at least the Ashkenazi Jewish people from Europe, is that we weren't allowed to own land. So the only thing you could take with you was your education. So there was always a very large pressure to have high education that could translate into a business, because when you know, they come and try to kill us all and you run away, you know, you can't take the land with you. So I think that's where it started culturally.
That makes sense. And that's something that obviously like your dad felt and believed in. And then, I mean, it's always interesting, like family dynamics. So he did prompt you to be entrepreneurial. And obviously that's ultimately where you ended up. But like other elements of your childhood, like maybe even speak like briefly about, because you've spoken about religion and why you chose not to be religious, and how like even like Jewish culture maybe influenced you as you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, for better or worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything has good and, you know, bad things to it. So for people who don't know, the Orthodox Jewish community is pretty intense, and there's it's pretty much the highest calling in life in that community is to study Bible and religious books all day, particularly the Talmud, which is this enormous body of work that kind of goes into the nitty-gritty details of what the Bible all means and what all the rules and how all the details of the rules and all the corner cases and it's like a very complex law text is what it is, and it's written in Aramaic, not even Hebrew, which is like an old dead version, like relation to Hebrew linguistically. So I spent many, many years, way more than I wanted, studying the Talmud in yeshiva. Yeah, it's an all-boys school. Didn't meet a girl that wasn't related to me until I was like 17. I was very traumatized. I was very, very awkward as a young guy, but I think the advantage of that was that I learned to really grind for many hours at a time on things that were not particularly interesting.
Yeah.
And
Jewish education is no joke.
Yes, exactly.
Like I have friends that are especially in Toronto. We don't have as many connections down here, but friends that were Orthodox in Toronto, Orthodox Jews in Toronto. And I can't remember the exact hours, and I never really paid attention that much. They don't have kids. but like their average school like starts way earlier and goes way later.
So yeah, so my schedule during high school was we'd get to school at 7:30 in the morning to pray, then we'd eat breakfast, and then we'd study Talmud until like lunchtime. And then after lunch, we'd have our secular subjects until dinner time, have dinner, and then do more studies of more religious studies, do our homework, go to sleep, wake up and do it again. So it was like they designed it so that you would not have any free time, specifically so that I went to school right on the edge of South Beach, right? So like literally a few blocks walk was all the parties and all the clubs and everything. And I was in my button-down white shirt and my black hat and, my sideburns, coming down. So
You were super religious.
I was very religious. Yeah, I'm not by choice, but but yeah, it was a real night and day kind of cultural difference.
And then so talk to me about that. So I think that even choosing to move away from being so religious and so strict, that also pushed you into different jobs and different avenues. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I'm one of 9 children, as I mentioned. I'm third from the oldest, and my older 2 siblings remained religious. So it was when I started doubting the religion and started kind of giving indications I didn't want to lead the religious lifestyle, my parents freaked out because they were like, oh, it's
the first 2 words.
It's the first, yeah, exactly. And he's going to be a bad influence on the other children. And they were right about that. They weren't wrong. Out of my 6 younger siblings, 5 of them became not religious. So I'm very proud of that. I led them to freedom, so freedom of the mind. So yeah, they pressured me a lot to remain in the religion. After high school, they wanted me to go to Israel to study the religion. They're like, "Oh, this is your immortal soul on the line. Don't you think you should take at least a year to find out whether it's true?" I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I went to Israel I ended up staying for 2 years. But then I went to college and took a general anthropology class, and I realized that everything they taught me was just not possible. It was not, because I'm not saying everything is bullshit, right? There's plenty of wisdom in all religions, right? And if I respect people who want to live that lifestyle. Everyone makes their decisions for themselves. But the claim in Orthodox Judaism is that the Bible is literally true, right? God created the earth 5,700 whatever years ago, and in 6 days, and the earth was made before the sun, and it goes against science, all of science, not just like one element of science. And so when I went and took a general anthropology class, and I learned how they date fossils, how they track the divergence of languages in human populations, and how genetic diversity is tracked, and how we know that the Native Americans have been here for at least 20,000 years, and Chinese culture has been around for 5,000 years and wasn't wiped out in a flood, and like 4,000 years ago. So the flood, Noah's flood, never happened. It just never happened. Either all of science is wrong, like every single branch of science, radiocarbon dating, archaeology, linguistics, genetics, like wholly different types of science. They have to all be wrong, or the flood just never happened the way it says it in the Bible. It just didn't. So when I took that class, I realized, there's no, because I kind of went back and forth throughout my teens, because I was really into reading science fiction, and science fiction tends to be pretty skeptical about religion. But when I finally learned how the science is done, I realized there's no way that science could be true, and this could also be true the way they portray it. So that was the final nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Do you think that sort of that realization not just pushed you down like entrepreneurship and building your own thing, but did it push it away from what your parents wanted for you completely? Not just religion, but doctor, lawyer, like everything they envisioned for you. That's so fascinating, because you went the complete 180. And I wonder if it was like that was part of it. It was like everything that my parents stand for, and everything at the time. Like now I'm sure the relationship has changed significantly. But at the time, was that sort of the inflection point that pushed you down the path that you're on?
I didn't really reject the traditional route so much because I did go to college and I was studying chemistry, and mainly because everyone said, oh, if you want like job security, get a degree in hard science, right? And I was pretty good at math, so in science I always did very well in school with that stuff. So I figured, well, if I can, most people can't do well in that and I can, I might as well study that. But I've always been doing entrepreneurial ventures on the side. So like while I was in university, I started importing SD cards from China to sell on eBay.
This is not government contract.
No, this is before this is actually how I got into the government contracting later. I started selling SD cards. I started importing bed sheets and towels from Pakistan to sell to nursing homes and hospitals here.
So your mind is always thinking entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, it was different opportunities that arose. So I'll give you a very brief of how I got into each of because they're so random, you know. They're very random, yeah. So the SD cards, I got into it because I bought at the time, like digital cameras were becoming a big thing. This is early 2000s, and the SD cards were super expensive at the time, and you know, I was always looking for a better price, and I kept on searching for a better price. And the only good prices that I found was if I bought like 100 of them, and so I had to buy 100 of them. Like, you know, this is such a good price, I could sell the rest of them on eBay. And so I initially just tried to buy one for myself, but then I realized this is a business opportunity. Exactly. And so I started selling that, and that was a great business because SD cards are tiny and easy to ship and don't take up much room. And then I spoke to a friend of mine who I met in Israel, and he was doing a medical supplies distribution business in the United States. His dad owned a nursing home, and that's how he got into it. So, but he told me, he's like, you know, I told him about the SD card business, and he was very impressed. He's like, oh, that's awesome that you found suppliers overseas. You know, I buy all my stuff from distributors in the United States, but I know they buy it overseas. So if you could find me a supplier overseas, I'm happy to buy from you instead if you beat my distributor's prices. So I started researching it and eventually found a good factory, and that's how I got into the bedsheet and towel business. And so yeah, and that's kind of how I got into government contracting, because my partner, my former partner, Efraim, when he heard about my businesses, when I met up with him, he was like, oh, that a lot of stuff you're doing is similar to what I'm doing, searching for suppliers overseas, arranging logistics, doing the paperwork. And
you had never met him.
Yeah.
You could have built a very lucrative business out of all of these things, importing from overseas.
I was well on my way at the time, yeah.
So, I mean, so when you, where did you meet Efraim?
Well, we first met when we were both in our teens. He's actually 4 years younger than me. So I think I was like maybe 16 and he was 12, and our families went to the same synagogue. So that's how and neither of us liked to pray. So we'd sneak out during prayers and we'd go hang out like on the basketball courts and stuff. And that's kind of how we met. When he was, I think when he was 16 years old, he got kicked out of we both went to private Jewish schools, Orthodox Jewish schools, but we went to different ones. He got kicked out of school for smoking weed. He got caught smoking weed there. They took that back then they thought it was the same as heroin, you know, smoking weed, you know, and so they're, oh, you're going to end up on the streets and you're going to train.
They still kind of do. I mean, I'm Canadian, and Canada, you can actually just buy weed anywhere, but yes, it's a little bit different in some states.
Miami's starting to relax about that stuff. There, you can actually buy weed, you know, quite a few places here now too, legally.
I feel like liquor is probably a little bit more dangerous for some people than weed, but
yeah, a little, yeah. So yeah,
got in trouble. He got in trouble.
So he got into trouble for smoking weed. He got kicked out of school, and so they told him, "Hey, you know, if you're not going to respect the rules of the school, you're going to find out what life's really about, and you're going to join the workforce." And so they sent him off to work for his uncle, who owned this big pawn shop and a warehouse in South Central LA. And his uncle realized he was a good talker, so he put him to work as a salesman in the pawn shop. And as a 16-year-old boy, he got obsessed with guns. You know, like teenage boys.
Any 0-year-old guy.
Exactly. They either get obsessed with guns or sports or guitars. You know cars. Right. Yeah. Those are the four major things I think that teenage guys get obsessed with. I was into guitars. I was a musician. Yeah, and he was a gun nut. So he got obsessed with guns. He started selling the guns in the store. His uncle was doing government contracting. Bidding on mostly local and state police contracts to sell guns to the local and state police. And so he taught Efraim how to bid on the government contracts, how to work the government contracting system. Worked for his uncle for about 2 years until they had a falling out. They each claimed the other screwed the other. They're both terrible people. So, I was like, I was like, hey, yeah, for real. I think that's where he learned his kind of sneaky business tactics.
And probably, I mean, that's who he worked with.
Yeah. And his grandfather also is notorious for this. His uncle's father. Yeah. It's not the entire family, because it's interesting because, I mean, his dad, who's not related to his dad is his uncle is his mother's brother. Yeah. So his dad is a super sweet guy, like the complete opposite of him. And yes, it's really interesting. But his grandfather was a real estate billionaire and owned like enormous amounts of South Central LA. He was a slumlord. And he gave one of his sons, Efraim's uncle, property to set up the pawn shop in. And so that's kind of how that whole thing started. But his grandfather is notorious also for kind of sneaky business tactics.
Like, it's not just slumlord, it's like less than above board. Okay.
Just to give you an example. So his grandfather got into the media because he'd been married to his grandmother for about 40 years. They had like 8 kids together. And after about 40 years, she decided to divorce him. He's this old school Iranian guy. So, who knows for the reasons, but she decides to divorce him. And it turns out that she was never married to him legally. He had just married her in the synagogue. So there was no legal, like in the state of California, and so when she, tried to get like alimony, because all her kids were grown up, so she wasn't going to get like child support. He offered her $0, and he was a billionaire, and he was like, "You get nothing." And so she had to sue him. She sued him for like $700 million. It was the biggest alimony lawsuit in like history. I think they eventually settled for a tiny fraction of that, but still.
But it goes to show the kind of person, who's a billionaire who wouldn't give the wife of his 8 kids like $1.
Exactly. So that's the kind of family.
So he didn't have a chance.
Yeah. Well, not all his siblings aren't like him, so it's not like, I'm not saying they're all like that. His siblings are actually really nice people. I know them. He's a special case. It's interesting because like I think there's like a certain characteristic that runs through the family, but it doesn't get to everybody. So like I'm not like a licensed mental health professional or anything like that, but from everything I've read about sociopaths, he fits it to a T. Like he doesn't have any empathy for people. And I'll give you a really funny story that kind of fun.
I've heard this as well, that like the Jonah Hill portrayal is actually like very nice.
Jonah made him look a lot nicer than he was in real life. Yeah. But I'll give you a story of kind of his mindset. So at the time, we had a friend who was addicted to heroin and was very depressed, and he had been Baker acted a few times. So like we were really worried that he was going to kill himself. And we were all discussing, it was a group of us, childhood friends who, including Efraim, who were there, and we were discussing our friend's issues. And Efraim says, wait a second, you're telling me he's addicted to heroin and he's suicidal? Oh, I have a great idea. We're going to get a life insurance policy on him, and then we're going to anonymously send him a bunch of drugs. Oh, this can't fucking fail. And we were like, dude, you are a piece of shit.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
I wasn't joking.
He was joking, but only
like not joking.
Yeah, he was kind of he never actually did it that we know of.
But yeah, I guess you also don't make jokes like that. That's like just really...
Yeah, exactly. It was just
normal people
horrible.
Don't say that shit.
Exactly. You don't think like that. You're like, that's not the first thing that pops into your mind when you hear about your friend who's suicidal and struggling.
No, you're like, how can we get him some help? Like, let's go spend some time with him so he's not alone.
That's what we were all saying, and that was where he went. So, it kind of goes to show you the mindset.
Some red flags. Early red flags.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the obvious question is, at what point did you decide after all these red flags that you wanted to work with him?
Well, so when I bumped into him and decided to work with him, I hadn't seen him for a few years.
At what age were you now?
I think I was 22 when we first met up, and Yeah, I was about 22, 23. And yeah, I was 22. Yeah, because he was 18. And we bumped into each other at a mutual friend's house, and he asked me what I was doing these days, and I told him about the SD card business and the the bed sheet business, and he's like, oh, you're doing a lot of stuff. You're doing the same thing I'm doing, finding suppliers, arranging logistics, licensing, financing, etc. He's like, but I bet I'm making way more money than you. And I thought I was hot shit at the time. I was like, I had made about in about a year and a half, about $100,000, which at the time was very young. Yeah, I was young, all legal, That's a caveat, exactly. And so I thought I was doing pretty well. I was making way more money than any of my friends. And I'm like, well, I mean, how much money? I asked him, like, how much money have you made? And he's like, I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you, but only to inspire you, right? Because he wanted me to work with him. And he's like, I'm not bragging here. He opens up his computer and he shows me his Bank of America account. He had $1.8 million in the bank at 18 years old. And I knew his parents were not giving him money or anything like that. I knew his family. So I was like, holy crap. I thought I was doing pretty well by making $100K. He made almost $2 million in a year. So I was like, he's definitely doing way better than me, and he knows something I don't. And so he's like, yeah, we can make way more money working together. You should talk more.
At this point, what he was doing was all legitimate.
Well, completely legitimate. Yeah, everything was legal until it wasn't, that's as the famous saying goes. But yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm in. When I was super impressed. I couldn't believe that he had done all that by himself. And so that's how I got into the government contracting business.
And then, what was the first contract that you guys take on? What was the first, how do you even, so he knows the business, he's teaching you the business. What's the first thing that you do successfully? So he's done a few successfully already. You're new to this.
Right. So because he was a gun nut, he specialized in small arms and ammunition. And this is in 2004, 2005. Yeah. 2005 when we actually started working together. And so this was right after the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the idea there was that we were going to build a democratic country. And so that worked. It didn't work too well. Best laid plans. So, because we destroyed Saddam Hussein and now we were trying to build up the country of Iraq. So the idea is so we can leave. And part of that was building up their military and police force, and they needed lots of equipment for that. So he was bidding on all these contracts to supply small arms and ammunition. And that's how he made his $2 million. He did that very well. So that was his specialty. And so the idea when I started working with him was that I would do something in a different field to expand the business. And so I started working on fuel contracts because that's an enormous amount of business. It's very fungible, gasoline here is same as gasoline there, right? So it's not, you don't have to worry too much about quality. And it's a consumable, so they're constantly needing more of it. So my first contract that I ever won in government contracting was for 40,000 gallons of propane. And I delivered it to a Air Force base in Wyoming.
And how do you do this? How do you go about finding 40,000 gallons of propane? Because I don't think many people know.
It's actually simpler than you think. You just Google, propane wholesalers, and in the area, because logistic, you have to give them a delivered price. The government always wants a delivered price.
So all costs in.
All costs in. Yeah. So transportation included, any licensing, whatever, all costs you have to figure out and then give them a delivered costs. So I just Googled propane wholesalers in the general Midwest area, and a lot of people ignore you. A few people give you prices. Some people give you referrals to other people. Eventually, I got a pretty good price, and also got a pretty good price on the transportation. Put it all in, all the possibilities in a spreadsheet. Figured which combo is the best price, and then Efraim was an amazing negotiator. You could really talk. So he got on the phone and he negotiated them down to the rock bottom.
And William, this is the game. The game is relationships and negotiation.
Absolutely.
Because if you just Google,
absolutely,
your margins are going to be razor thin. Because everybody's Googling. And I'm sure after people watched your movie, 100,000 people wanted to do the same thing, but it's about how do you get this person to give you the lowest possible price?
Exactly. And so it's all about negotiation and relationships. And occasionally you get really lucky and you can buy something at in a liquidation sale and make enormous margins. It's not necessarily always razor thin margins. To jump ahead a little bit, with with my business War Dogs Academy, one of our students made a 40% margin on something because he bought it wholesale from someone who was doing a fire sale. So you can you can make enormous margins. You just need to know the business. You need to know the industry. You need to know what's available out there. So the government doesn't really care how much margins you're making. They just want the lowest price out of the available options. And so usually if you don't know the business, you don't know the industry, you're going to bid it at a very low profit margin because you don't know who your competitors are. You don't want to lose, right? Because otherwise you get zero. It's better to get a little bit than zero. But if you know the industry well and you know what the other suppliers have access to, and you know that you have access to, let's say, like there are certain items that they can be sold underneath manufacturing costs, like clothing, that go out of style. The next season they're trying to get rid of it, and they'll sell it for anything. It doesn't matter what.
Was it ninth then or zero for that?
Exactly. Otherwise, it goes in the trash. Ammunition that militaries, is coming towards the end of their official shelf life. They're happy to get rid of it at very low prices.
And when you're in this game long enough, you start to see those opportunities.
Exactly. You see it. The more you know the industry.
Well, I was going to say, is there like outside of, this is just like smart business and the right relationships, right connections, and sort of like looking for the opportunities. Like, do you need to be licensed to do this, to sell to the government?
You need to be registered with the government, meaning you need to have a company. You can't do it individually. You have to do it under a corporate structure. And it could be a U.S. company. It could be a foreign company. People think only U.S. citizens or U.S. companies can bid. That's not true. As long as you're not like a company in like Russia or North Korea, Iran. Yeah. Any of our enemy countries, that's going to be a
don't incorporate in North.
Don't incorporate in North Korea. I don't even know if that's an option, but as long as you're in like a friendly country to the United States, you can register your foreign company to do business with the U.S. government. There are certain advantages for certain U.S. companies, like they'll have what they call set-asides. So set-aside is the government sets aside a certain amount of money to go to special categories of business. So for example, small business is a big set-aside. I forgot the exact numbers, but something about like 20 to 30% of all money needs to go to small businesses. These are businesses that do like under 10 million of revenue a year. That's how they.
And I only know one other person who's played in government contract. Actually, no, sorry, a friend who's an investor in government contracting and defense, and then another friend who actually does it. And she was saying that she's trying to figure out how to keep her business under a certain dollar value, so she doesn't have to compete against like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and shit.
Like she could qualify for the small business set aside.
So this is exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, and there are other set asides. There's if you're a veteran-owned business, a disabled veteran-owned business gets special set aside. A woman-owned business, a business that's in an economically disadvantaged zone, right? So like if you're like in a rural area, they classify certain areas as economically disadvantaged, and then there are certain contracts that only these companies with these designations can bid on. So like Lockheed Martin can't bid on a contract that is a set aside for small business. So there are certain advantages for these various categories. But other than that, you just need to register your company with the federal government to bid on contracts. And depending on what items you're shipping to them, what you want to bid on, you may need other licenses. Like if you're shipping like machine guns, you may need a Class 3 federal firearms license.
Understood. So that was your first contract.
Yeah.
Went well. Business is going like, and when you start to work with Efraim, like obviously there's red flags throughout your entire relationship with him, but you got into business with him. Were there like red flags right away that you noticed outside of being a good negotiator, which a gift of gab, whatever, like, but talk to me about like some of the things you noticed when you were like building this biz, like AEY with him. Yeah.
So there were two major besides the story with because when I first started working with him, I hadn't like hung out with him in years. So, the kid that I knew from years ago, he didn't have those red flags. He was pretty much just a joker, like he was like the class clown, so to speak. He was a very funny guy, very entertaining, loved to play practical jokes on people. That was like his.
But he's not doing anything.
But he's not doing anything like sociopathic or anything like that. So there were a few red flags that I noticed somewhat early on that kind of gave me pause. One was when we went to like a gun show in in Orlando, and we were driving on our way back to Miami. And he was driving, and we were going down this highway, this like really long highway and didn't have any late at night, and it didn't have any street lights. And it was one of those highways where it's very straight, but like there's only one lane going one way and one lane going the other way, no real median. And so there are cars coming by us, and I told him, like, Efraim, you have to turn your brights down when there's cars coming at us. So he had his high beams on, exactly. And he's like, why? I need to see the road. And I'm like, yeah, but you could blind the other driver and they can crash. And he's like, who cares? I need to see the road, you know? And I said, yeah, but Efraim, they could crash into us. And he's like, oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. And then he turns the high beams down. And I was like, and he did this completely seriously. He wasn't joking, you know? Like he was like, oh, like it just dawned on him. Oh, I should care about that other person.
Very self-serving.
Completely. It didn't even occur to him that he should care at all about that person crashing into and losing their lives, only if it affected him. So that was like, whoa, this guy is not normal, you know? And the other big red flag that really struck me, like within like about 2 months of working together, was we were working out of his living room, and he didn't have an office. So we were working out of his living room. And I was working on like fuel contracts, but he loved talking on the speakerphone, you know, like he would always do that. So I'd hear his conversations. And he got a call from like one of his contacts in the industry who was trying to supply the King of Nepal. The King of Nepal at the time had a whole bunch of pro-democracy protests in his country, and the King of Nepal was trying to buy attack helicopters, riot gear, heavy machine guns, tear gas, etc.
Was King of Nepal like dictator?
Yes, yeah, he was a king.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah.
This sounds like pro-democracy.
Yeah, classic king, you know, and he was facing down pro-democracy protests, and the king was trying to buy all these pretty serious crowd control methods, you know, with the entire range of non-lethal all the way to very lethal, like attack helicopters and heavy machine guns. And Efraim got super excited, and he's like, oh, I'm going to put together a Save the King package. And I'm like, Efraim, that's kind of fucked up.
But that's illegal, no?
So, and that's what I told him. Like, Efraim, are you sure that that's legal? Because I'm pretty sure the State Department isn't going to be happy about you supplying the king to brutally crush the pro-democracy protests. And he goes to me, he's like, just work on your fuel contracts, bro. You leave this shit to me, all right? And I'm like, whoa.
So there's like zero moral compass here.
Zero. And also besides the moral compass, I was like, this guy might be doing some serious illegal shit. And
yes, I mean, moral's the first check, but then after that, it's like,
yeah. And I'm like, fucked up and illegal stuff, and I might get caught up in this. And I was like, oh, and so that really kind of scared me.
It's only 2 months in.
Like 2 months in.
How long did it, like the whole life of the working together, how long was that?
About 1.5 years.
It wasn't very long.
No, not that long.
Wasn't very long. Yeah. And were you
a little under 2 years?
Because I know, like in the movie, like the whole last scene is about the contract, and like you in air quotes, like don't get paid out. Did you only have contract, or you on like the cap table? Like, were you equity owner in the business?
No, I was. We had a commission agreement.
Okay, so you did not. So technically, liability should not be as incumbent on you as on him, because you were not co-founders of the business.
I did not own any of the business, but I was involved in the activities. I was a co-conspirator.
I understand, because I was trying to figure that out. I'm like, if you didn't do anything illegal and my business partner did, but I was a co-founder in the business, and technically the business entity was doing illegal shit, and even if I didn't know that he did it, there's a chance that I could still be liable. But if I was an employee and my boss was doing illegal shit, then hopefully I wouldn't be.
But if you collaborated with him in those illegal activities, then you are liable, even if you don't own the business.
I understand. Well, no, if it's illegal, it's 100% illegal. I mean, if you didn't know what he was doing some shady shit on the side or whatever. Okay, so then this is 2 months in. It's already getting spicy. Okay, so then the whole movie's about this like $300 million deal. When does that actually take place?
Just to finish up the Nepal issue, he worked on it for like 2 weeks really hard. And so he was seriously, curious. Oh, yeah. No, he had sources lined up. He was working on logistics. He had a whole fucking...
He gave no shits. That it was completely illegal.
Zero. And then he got really pissed because, as he put it, peace broke out. And he's like, peace broke out. The king made a deal with the protesters. The deal is dead. And I was like, that's probably a good thing, Efraim.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah, I'd been in jail. Yeah, a lot earlier.
Maybe longer.
Yeah,
possibly. It's so interesting because you hate the term like warlord.
Yeah.
Or like warmonger or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's not accurate, I would say.
No, but like what he was trying to do.
Yeah, that was more closer to that.
Which is super fun. Like it's so it's not funny. It's just interesting because it's almost like he was like a walking cliche for arms dealer. Because there's a lot of people that are arms dealers that kind of like what you did, you sold to the US government. It's completely above board. Whether or not you agree or disagree with what the US does globally, it's a business. You are selling to a Western country.
Yeah, like Lockheed Martin.
Boeing, they all do the same shit. It's so strange to me that it seems like he watched Lord of War and is like, I want to cosplay as an arms dealer. Even though there's more money than you know what to do with by selling to the US government, it's just so strange that you would want to start a business to put yourself in an illegal position before you even made like any significant amount of money. It doesn't compute. But then this goes back to your point. He's not thinking like the rest of anybody who would do this business.
He did love Lord of War. That was his favorite movie.
Because it seems like he watched it. He's like, I'm going to be an arms dealer like that, and I'm going to sell to all these countries all over the world that the U.S. does not approve of me selling to. Very interesting. Anyways, so this was like the first sort of red flag moment. Your deal fell apart. Good, because then you would have been in trouble too. So what's the next like major deal? Were there other major deals before this $300 million deal?
It was so the first arms contract I worked on when I made the switch from fuel to arms was he had won a contract to supply the special forces with a bunch of rare gun parts and like weapon systems, because the special forces train on a whole bunch. They pretty much try to train on everything. So because when they're out in the field, they don't know what they're going to come across, what kind of equipment's going to exactly. So they train on old World War II era stuff, on Soviet stuff, on everything. So he knew the industry well enough that there was this contract of, I think it's like 130 different types of like weapon systems and gun parts. And they're all rare and like historical and very hard to source. And so he put a very high profit margin on it because he knew almost nobody was going to be bidding on this. And he put a very high profit margin without actually locking down the sources. And so he won the contract without having the sources lined up. So he told me, he's like, look, I know we have enough margin on here. We can definitely deliver on this profitably, but you need to find the sources to these items. So I don't want to do this. This is going to be way more work than I want to do. Why don't you work on this? And so I was like, okay, I mean, he already won the contract. All I have to do is deliver. At least there's that, there's, because with government contracting, it's like a roll of the dice. It's a casino. You don't know, you can put all this work into bidding on a contract and then lose. And so I knew at least he won the contract. Now I just have to find the sources for the supplies. So that was the first arms contract I worked on. And it took me like a good 2-something months to deliver all on that. I had to pretty much contact every little gun shop in America. It's like 70,000 of them, and I went down the ATF's FFL list, and they actually publish the phone numbers of all the federal firearms license holders, the ATF. I downloaded a spreadsheet, and it's like 70,000 businesses, and I pretty much called up every single one and tried to get, see what they had. It was an enormous amount of work, but I made a decent amount of money. And so that was like the first, like my first foray into the arms business.
Were you ever uncomfortable going into arms?
So I wasn't uncomfortable with that stuff. I wasn't uncomfortable supplying the U.S. government. I definitely didn't agree with the U.S. government's policies.
With the disagreeing with policies,
yes,
and saying like it's a business.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. It was. At the time, the United States was fighting the Taliban. I mean, that was where most of the stuff I worked on went. And I didn't feel bad about that. I thought Taliban they're not great people, and the people fighting them should be supported and all that. So I didn't feel bad about that. And also and this is something that anyone who wants to make excuses says, but like an army can't fight without bullets. They also can't fight without fuel or food or, jeeps or any million other things. So, it's people kind of focus on the arms as being like you're enabling, military operations, but really all aspects of the support, enabled that. It's just as much.
I think that, you're probably right.
Yeah.
People think about like dealing in munitions.
Right.
Okay, maybe there's like a slightly negative undertone to it, but ultimately if you're doing food contracts or medical supplies for the U.S. Army,
right,
it's all supporting the same in it.
All the same thing. They wouldn't be able to do what they do without all those items.
Yeah.
So whether it's the bullets or the food, Army marches on its stomach, as they say.
So, I mean, you didn't obviously, Efraim has his own sort of idea about what he can do with his business. Were there other points where he tried to do shady shit, like deal with other countries like Nepal?
I think there was a moment where he almost got involved in supplying the FARC in Colombia, but he didn't end up doing that. That was a step too far for him. It was a step too far. He did try later when he was in prison. He tried to revive that deal in order to entrap the guy who was doing it, so he could get himself out.
Like a deal with the feds to.
Yeah, he was trying to entrap the guy. So it was a guy named Harry Chang who was based in Miami, who he had done a whole bunch of business with, and Harry Chang tried to get him involved to do this business to supply the FARC, and to his credit, he said no. But then when he went to prison, he tried to get his dad. There's actually a phone recording on YouTube where he's talking to his dad, trying to get his dad to revive the deal with Harry Chang to do this, to supply the FARC, so that he could entrap Harry Chang, so he can get time off his sentence.
I have to. Is this normal that dudes in Miami are supplying weapons to like dictators around the world? Is this?
I hope not.
No, but in all seriousness, like this is two instances of. So now you have this Harry Chang guy, and then you have Efraim as well, who was even thinking about Nepal. Is this like a big issue? This is wild.
Miami is particularly
Miami.
Yeah.
The U.S. You have a lot of homegrown weapons dealers that are doing under the table shady shit.
Well, if it stays under the table, you don't find out about it. Right. So I have no idea. But there have been quite a few people arrested for these kinds of deals. Yeah.
So they just see money and dollar signs.
They see money and they either don't know that it's illegal or they don't care. And I imagine it's more that they don't care.
Okay, my background, the company that acquired my software company, they do hardware. And I use their sales team a lot of when we were acquired, we were training our sales team on product and services and whatnot. And they weren't allowed to talk to people in certain parts of the world, and they were selling cameras.
Yeah.
And it's not like it wasn't confusing, or it wasn't known. Everybody knew that we cannot sell to people that either represent certain parts of the world or come from certain parts of the world or have connections to certain parts of the world. And this was because it was a large
ITAR regulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's very well known and film equipment.
Yeah,
not weapons.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know there were restrictions on film equipment. I know there's a lot of restrictions on night vision goggles and things like bulletproof vests,
which makes sense.
So yeah, it makes sense.
But I was hearing if it's something as non-dangerous as a camera,
right?
I mean,
right. Yeah. No, there are regular anything what they call dual use technologies, right? Anything that could be used for military purposes, they put restrictions on where you could sell it, and if you do that, you can get in a lot of trouble. I don't want to say that this is a super common thing, but but it does happen. People violate ITAR and they go to prison for it, and that's why.
And is there not enough money in the U.S. government?
There's more money than anywhere in the U.S. government.
Right? It seems silly. It seems like you're almost like an idiot for trying to sell to other countries.
I would definitely agree. I mean, the United States government has a budget, I think, of something like $7 trillion. Which not enough money, which is more than most other countries combined. Yeah.
Just over California, you're more than most countries.
Yeah, I mean, California on its own is like the 5th biggest economy in the world. So it's the United States is so much. People don't understand how wealthy the United States is and how much money the government spends. It's by far the biggest customer in the entire world by many times over. I think that the appeal of dealing with these other countries is that when you're doing government contracting and selling to the United States, you're playing the casino, right? You're doing a whole bunch of work, you're submitting the bid, and then you oftentimes lose, right? In fact, it's more often than not you lose. It's you win a minority of the contract you bid on. That's just normal, and it could be very disheartening to people that they put a lot of work into something and then they get no payoff for it. So when someone calls them up and says, hey, I've got this deal to whoever shady character overseas, all you have to do is supply it. There's no bidding process, just fucking do it. Then it's like, oh, easy money. And
Except
then
end up in jail.
Yeah, except you will.
It's small little.
It's the worst money you can make because that might get your life destroyed.
Yeah. So what happened with your $300 million deal? Where did that come from, and how did you find it, and how did you source it, and even the thought process? Because up until this point, you seem like the most above board. Like you get that shit isn't perfect with Efraim, but you're keeping him in his lane.
Yeah.
Everything you're doing is above board. Everything you're doing is clean, and there's like not like a series of points in your past where you've like tried to do shady businesses. You try and build real businesses that are fully compliant, fully above board. So what was the thing about this particular deal that sort of swayed you?
So, well, I mean, that deal was above board until it wasn't, again. But yeah, the $300 million deal that was kind of like the main focus of the film War Dogs, was it started, we saw it posted on the government website, which is sam.gov now they call it. We saw that I think it was about 9 months after I started working with Efraim, about 8-9 months. And Efraim saw this solicitation posted on the site, and he was like, oh, this is all the stuff that I've already delivered in much smaller quantities to Iraq. This was mostly Warsaw Pact munitions. For people who don't know, there's two major style of weapon systems. There's the West NATO standard, and there's the former Soviet Union countries called the Warsaw Pact standard. And like the AK-47 is Warsaw Pact, M16 is NATO. So they were supplying Afghanistan and Iraq with Warsaw Pact weapons and munitions because that's what the Iraqis and Afghanis were used to. They were already trained on that. And it also happened to be it was way cheaper than the United States.
So these are old Soviet weapons. Yeah.
These are all old Soviet weapons, which the United States doesn't manufacture much of. So when they wanted to, this was in mid to late 2006, where they put out the contract. This was like towards the end of the Bush administration. And the Bush administration was super unpopular in the United States at the time. And they figured that because he was so unpopular, the next president would probably be a Democrat, which they were right. Obama was the next president. But they also thought that the Democrats would pull out of Afghanistan immediately, which they were wrong about. It took until Biden to do that. But so their plan was that they were going to arm the Afghanis like for the next 30 years so that they could hold off the Taliban and any other terror groups that try to set up shop in Afghanistan. And so they put out a contract. In Iraq, they were supplying the Iraqi army, and they had split their needs amongst a whole bunch of suppliers, and it became a big clusterfuck. So they wanted to avoid that logistical nightmare, and they decided to do their entire needs through one contractor. And that's how this $300 million contract got put out. It was it was munitions. It wasn't weapons. It was everything from like pistol ammo to tank rounds, anti-aircraft rockets, grenades, pretty much the entire spectrum of munitions that an army and police force would ever need for like the next few decades. And they decided to put it out all through one supplier. So Efraim had already delivered a lot of these items to Iraq on a much smaller scale, which meant that we technically qualified to bid on it. Because the way that works is that if the contract is above a certain amount, these days if it's above $250,000 in value, you need to have a certain amount of past performance history, right? Proof that you've done this business before. And the bigger the contract you're bidding on, the more past performance they require. And he had lots of past performance because he did a whole bunch of small contracts with this type of munitions. So we technically qualified. And so he's like, we qualify to this. We have to bid on it. Most likely General Dynamics or one of the big players is going to win, but we have to at least try. And he says to me, he's like, look, I've got, 5 really good sources for this stuff. These are my 5 sources, these companies, don't talk to them. But I need you to go and pretty much find every single source that's available on the internet in the world, because that's the only way we even have a shot of winning this thing, is if we are super competitive and we pretty much look under every rock and make sure that every potential source of supply is accounted for. And so the other contracts for the fuel stuff, we were splitting the profits 50-50 because I did all the work and then he did everything under his company and financed it and did the final negotiation. So it was a good split. But he says to me, he's like, for this, this is kind of my bread and butter. You're pretty much filling in the gaps. So we'll do 75-25. And I was like, that's fine. This is going to be an enormous contract. I'm going to pay if we win it. Right. But we didn't really think we were going to win because it was just such an enormous contract. But we figured we had to try. So I worked my ass off for probably about 2 months during the bidding period. They give you a deadline of when you need to submit your bid. And it was a major pain to get quotes for this because it was most of the source, because it's Warsaw Pact stuff. So most of the sources were from the former Soviet Union, who don't have the greatest customer service or English language skills. And at the time, they didn't even have, a lot of them didn't even have emails. They just had fax numbers. So you had to fax everything to them and call them up, make sure, and their phone lines kept on going out. So it would stop halfway through the fax. You have to make sure they got all the pages. You call them up and they have to find the one guy in the factory who speaks a tiny bit of English to confirm they got everything. And they always treat you like, you're really bothering them by trying to give them business, it's very the communist mentality of you're not happy to do your job, you're just trying to skate by with the minimum, so it was a real pain to work with them. But eventually I filled in all the cracks, so to speak, and it's actually some of the most profitable aspects of that contract were from sources I got, like the grenades. We made most of the money from the grenades. We just had really good margins on it, and but it took about 2 months, and we submitted it to the government, and then we didn't hear from them for another 3 months, and we were like, okay, we definitely lost this thing, and then they called us up, and they're like, we have to do a few audits on your company. And we're like, holy crap, we're still in the running.
And an audit means they're interested.
Yeah, it means that they're going, so before they give you a very big contract, the small contracts, they don't do this. But for a very big contract, they do a little investigation into you before they award you the contract. And it's a few different aspects. They call it an audit, right? Kind of like the IRS gives you an audit, but so they have a financial audit. They want to make sure you have enough money because the government only pays you 30 days after you deliver. And if you're delivering a lot of stuff, you need a lot of money to finance this. They want to make sure you have the money. They actually ask you to list all your sources of supply. So we told them who we were buying everything from. They want to see what companies you're going to use for transportation.
Just so that everything's above board.
Everything. They want you to pretty much lay out your entire plan to deliver on this contract so that they're not wasting their time and that this isn't going to end up in a disaster because it's such a big contract. They need to feel comfortable that you have a real plan and that you have a real shot at success at this. And they want to make sure that you're doing your accounting system correctly. And it's funny because Efraim had never done any of his accounting. He just did everything by the seat of his pants. So he had to hire a forensic accountant to come and look at all the deals he'd done and create a financial record and to backdate it to make it look like he had done it at the time, to make him look more responsible. And they wanted to send a contracting officers to our office to do a facility inspection, and we didn't have an office. So he quickly rented out a place in Miami Beach, hired a few young girls off Craigslist to act as receptionists. So it looked like we had people working there, put up a sign, and like within like a space of like a week, we were like, okay, we're ready for like our site inspection. And it was like a group of like 4 middle-aged older ladies, and all ladies for some reason. And they walk into the office, and Efraim says to them, he's like, for their inspection, he's like, oh, ladies, I couldn't tell over the phone how beautiful you all were. If it wasn't completely illegal, I'd buy you all diamonds right now. And they all like laugh and chuckle, and they gave him glowing reviews. And so a couple months later,
Smooth talker too.
He's an amazing talker.
Yeah.
He's an amazing talker. I have a lot of shit to say about Efraim, but he is a very talented at the gift of gab. He could talk anyone into anything, including me. So about 2 months later, they awarded us the contract.
I just want to take a second and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story. Now, if you enjoy Success Story, you're going to love other podcasts in their network like Business Made Simple, hosted by Donald Miller. If you've ever wondered why some businesses take off while many struggle, Donald Miller takes the mystery out of growing your business with actionable strategies that you can implement today. Whether you're trying to build a stronger team, craft a clearer message, or boost your bottom line, Business Made Simple delivers the frameworks that you need to succeed. Listen to Business Made Simple wherever you get your podcast.
That's insane. It's absolutely insane. So like I want to know where it all went wrong, but also when you look at like the movie, what parts of this were accurate versus not accurate?
Right. So the first thing everyone asks me was the triangle of death scene real, right? And the funny thing is that it was half real. Well, it was a real story, but it didn't happen to us. So the triangle of death scene was based on a real contract. We did have a contract to deliver 10,000 Berettas to Iraq. Unfortunately, we actually failed to deliver those Berettas in real life, but the story is based on the screenwriter of the War Dogs film, Stephen Chin. He wanted to interview these 2 American contractors who were on the ground in Baghdad back in like 2004, 2005, and so because he was writing another screenplay about them. And so he tried to get a flight into Baghdad, but there were no commercial flights. So he flew into Jordan, and he hired a Jordanian driver to drive him to Baghdad. And this driver wanted to save money on gas, and so he stopped in Fallujah to fill up. And he got shot at by insurgents and narrowly escaped and got saved by the U.S. Army. That whole thing actually happened to Stephen Chin. And so when Stephen was writing the screenplay for War Dogs, Todd Phillips, the director, he's like, these guys are in the office all day. We need some action here. Why don't you put your story in, about you, so that's how that got in there.
Just a point that you mentioned, like that one deal with the Berettas, like why would that not have worked out? Like,
so it was actually true that at the time after we won the contract, the Italian government passed a law forbidding all arms sales to Iraq. And so we were kind of stuck because we had sourced the Berettas in Italy, and now they weren't allowed to be exported. Exactly. So, I mean, we tried to get them to accept a substitute, an or equal, they call it, but they refused. They're like, Berettas are nothing. We're like, we can't, get any sources of Berettas here.
So there's some parts that were accurate, some parts were not. So are there other things like major differences that between the movie and what actually happened?
Well, the weed deal where he's firing a machine gun into that never happened. If you fire a machine gun in Miami, you're gonna get arrested. We did have machine guns in the trunk of the car. We were licensed to have them as a Class 3 federal firearms license, and we would go to like the gun range with like a pair of Uzis, and everyone else is popping off pistols, and suddenly you'd hear, and suddenly everyone else would stop, and they'd like, who the fuck was that? 100%. Yeah. So that was fun. Let's see what other parts. They add the whole aspect of my girlfriend. Me lying to my girlfriend about the business, and she dumps me because I'm lying to her. She knew the whole time. She had no problem with any of it. As she put it to me, she's like, as long as you're making money. And that's what she cared about. As long as you're, yeah. She was very supportive. She was very supportive. She really didn't care about what business I was doing as long as I was bringing in the money. Yeah, classic Miami.
The very classic Miami. Okay, so $300 million deal. Everything sounds like you were doing it right.
Yeah.
Again, until it doesn't go right. So what happened?
So the contract was for like 30 different items, right? And as I said, everything from pistol ammo all the way up to anti-aircraft rockets. We had the biggest logistical headache we knew was going to be the ammo for the AK-47, 7.62 by 39. And it was also one of the least profitable aspects of the contract. It's just high volume, low margins. We had sourced this ammo in Albania through a Swiss arms dealer named Henry Tomei. In the movie, he's played by Bradley Cooper. They changed his name to Henry Gerard. But in real life, he doesn't. In the movie, Bradley Cooper looks really rough. He's like thick glasses, unshaven beard, like screaming, do your fucking job, like that kind of. Like in real life, he was a very clean cut. He looked like a Swiss banker. I never heard him raise his voice ever. He was a real professional. Like he had been in the arms business since like he was 18 years old.
Too.
Oh, no.
No?
Henry was real slick. He was on the I think Amnesty International's like watch list.
Oh, okay, that doesn't sound so legit.
No, it was not. They never proved anything, which was why it was legal for us to do business with him, right? And the United States government knew we were doing business with him because we listed him as one of our suppliers in the audit that they gave us. So they knew we were buying through him. Amnesty International put him on a watch list because they suspected him of supplying some warlords in Africa with various things, but they couldn't prove it. So he never got officially legally banned. But he had been doing business in the army. He'd been in the arms business since he was like 18 years old. He was like in his 40s by the time we were doing business with him. So he was very, very connected. He set up a deal for us to buy the AK-47 ammo from the Albanian government, who at the time was trying to join NATO. And one of NATO's requirements is that they get rid of all their old Soviet weapons and ammo. And so they were going to have to pay to dismantle this stuff. And so they were thrilled to sell it for pretty much anything. And Henry was really good friends with the Albanian prime minister's son. And that's how he like set up this deal for us. So at the time, we didn't know anything about Albania. It was, who knows about Albania, right? It was a tiny little country. Most people haven't even heard of it in the United States. So, we signed the contract to buy this stuff, and we at the time there was a enormous spike in oil prices in early 2007, and we had to fly everything into Afghanistan by air freight because Afghanistan is landlocked and it's Pakistan on one side and Russia and the Central Asian countries on the other side, and surrounded by warlords who would just love for a big shipment of ammunition to go through their territory that they can grab. So we had to fly everything in. And 80-90% of the air freight is fuel costs. So when the oil prices spiked, we were like underwater on this aspect of the contract. We were going to lose money here. Now, a professional company like General Dynamics, they would have hedged, right? They would have bought like a fuel hedge, but Efraim doesn't run like that. He doesn't see that. So we were kind of screwed. We were like, how are we going to do that?
But it was only on one part of the contract.
It was only on one part. The rest of it was very, like the grenades and the larger caliber stuff was very profitable, but we didn't want to lose money on this. So, we were actually debating, maybe it's better to lose money on this aspect of the contract so we could deliver on the other aspects and overall we'll make money. But of course that was like, Efraim was allergic to that. He's like, no, we're not losing money, And so I had the idea, I told Efraim like, because we got pictures of the ammo and we're like, this is, They were stored in these metal sardine cans, which were vacuum sealed, and the metal sardine cans were put into these heavy wooden crates. And I told him, like, Efraim, we don't really need to ship the wooden crates. We could just take the sardine cans out and strap them to the pallet and we'll save some weight. Maybe that'll be enough weight to make this profitable. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. So I told him, okay, I'll ask the Albanians to weigh the crates. He's like, oh, you can't trust those motherfuckers. We have to go to Albania ourselves and weigh it. And he's like, but not you. I need you in Miami. You're dealing with I was dealing with like 9 different suppliers. I was also dealing with the government who based out of Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. So all these different time zones. He's like, I need you in the office taking care of the contract. He's like, we need to send someone. So I had a really good friend of mine, Alex, at the time. He had just done a stint. He's a dual citizen with France, so he had done a stint in the French military. He had a degree in international relations. He's trilingual, very smart guy. He was looking for a job, and I said, well, why don't we send, Alex can take care of this. And so we send Alex over there, and he calls me up and he's like, yeah, I weighed the crates. These are the numbers. And it turned out the wooden crates were super heavy. And so it put us back into profitability. And he's like, but you do know this stuff is all Chinese, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, there's like Chinese markings all over the boxes. And I'm like, let me tell Efraim. And Ephraim's like, oh shit, that's a big problem, because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition can be delivered under this contract. And
why is that?
Because there is a arms embargo against. In 1989, there was the Tiananmen Square massacre. Yeah. And in central of Beijing, a bunch of Chinese college students were protesting for democracy, and the Chinese government rolled in tanks and soldiers and killed a lot of people. There's a very famous picture of a guy standing in front of a line of tanks. So that was on international TV. And because of that, the United States placed the Chinese government on an arms embargo. So it's illegal for U.S. citizens, companies to do military business with the Chinese. So our contract said no Chinese ammunition can be delivered
Even though it's not from China.
Directly or indirectly, they put.
Okay.
Directly or indirectly. Now, the reason they put that in was as a reference to the embargo, but they didn't reference the embargo in our contract. So the ammunition that was in Albania had been given to the Albanians by the Chinese in the 70s. Because Albania pulled out of alignment with the Soviet Union, made an alliance with China. It was run by this crazy dictator who was a true communist believer, and he thought that the people in the Kremlin were a bunch of self-serving assholes and not true communists, but the Chinese were. He liked Chairman Mao, so he made an alliance with the Chairman.
Is now extreme communist. Yeah. Okay.
And so when he pulled out of the alliance with the Soviet Union, he thought the Soviet Union would invade him, as they did with like Czechoslovakia and other places. They don't like it when you pull out. And he thought because he's communist, NATO would invade him too. So like the two big superpowers of the world were going to invade his tiny little country. And so he decided that his strategy was to create a massive network of underground bunkers all over the country to be safe from bombardment, and pack them full of weapons and ammunition so that if he gets invaded, all his citizens could become soldiers and everyone fights to the death. That was his plan. He called it total war. And so he got his weapons and ammo from his new best friends, the Chinese, in the 70s, so before there was an arms embargo against the Chinese. So this ammunition did not violate the arms embargo, but it did violate the terms of our commercial contract with the U.S. Army, because it's just said no Chinese directly or indirectly, period. Not no Chinese that violates the arms embargo. So at the time when we discovered that this was Chinese, we had a discussion. We're like, okay, we have 2 options here. We could tell the Army and they can ask for a waiver. We're like, hey, you wrote our contract a little vaguely. Can you just specify that it's just Chinese that violates the arms embargo?
Post-embargo ammunition.
Exactly. Yeah. Post-embargo ammunition that we can't deliver. And we thought, well, if we do that, they could say yes. And in retrospect, they probably would have, because it turned out they knew the whole time what we were delivering. The State Department in Albania obviously knew, because they know the history of Albania. And, but we also thought if we tell them this, then the Army could say something along the lines of, well, General Dynamics and your other competitors, they were very upset you won this contract, and they really were. They were really. We had met with the leader of the brokering group in General Dynamics who was working on this, and he told us, "Oh yeah, we're very confident we're going to win this, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't put too much work into this." And so we knew that they were really pissed.
That's a lot of money even for them.
Yeah, even for them, $300 million. Well, I think they bid it at like $500 million, so we beat them by quite a lot.
Yeah.
That's a $500 million contract that moves the needle even for General Dynamics. So we were worried that the Army would say something along the lines of, well, all your competitors had to bid under the terms of the contract with no Chinese period. It's not fair that we change the rules after. So we're going to take this contract away from you, put it out for open bid, and you could bid on it correctly this time, and good luck.
Do you believe truly, though? Because when I look at that situation, like outside looking in, and what the Army would and wouldn't do, when I think about that, I would just think they would say, no, please go source the ammunition somewhere else. We don't want to just read. Who wants to put an RFP out aside?
They don't want to do it. The problem was, and in retrospect, they definitely would have said that first, right? The problem is that there is it takes a while to move arms, right? You need to get the licensing and the overflight permits and all that. Every time if you fly military gear over a country's airspace, you need to ask permission from that country, and they need to give you a license to fly your military stuff over. And I think there was like 12 or 13 countries between Albania and Afghanistan, and so it took us like a good 2-3 months to get all that lined up. And so if we were going to switch sources, it was going to take us another bunch of months to do that. And at the time, so Afghanistan has a fighting season because they have really tall mountains, and in the winter it fills up with snow, so it becomes impassable. So this was like April time, so fighting season started because the snows were melting and the Taliban was attacking, and our Afghan allies were running out of ammo, and the Army was yelling at us, "Get that shit over there!" So they were very time sensitive, and we knew if we were going to switch sources, that was going to delay things at least another 2-3 months. Now, in retrospect, them rebidding out the contract would have delayed it even more. But we didn't make that calculation, So, and in retrospect, they knew the whole time anyway, because our Alex actually met with one of the representatives from the State Department in Albania, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that stuff's all Chinese, but it's great. The Albania is trying to get rid of it anyway, and our Afghan allies need it. It's just a win-win-win for everybody." Exactly.
Yeah.
So the State Department had no problem with it. We were just worried that some bureaucrat in the Army, is going to be like, "Oh, well, this violates, the terms of our bidding process, et cetera, and you bid this under false pretenses, and and you got us to put all these licenses for stuff that doesn't." It's so conform to the.
But that's wild that even though they were most likely okay with it, you still got in trouble for something that they were most likely okay with just because you didn't ask.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely wild. Like, you'd think that would come into play when they were actually looking at what did these guys do wrong.
Right.
And it's like, well, yes, maybe it's like a fine.
Yeah.
Or you can't bid for a period of time. But if you were okay with it to begin with, why are you sending guys to jail over what is really a technicality and contractual language? That's what's very interesting.
Right. Well, they weren't going to, and they actually knew. So where this, I'll go through the little history.
I'm jumping around.
Yeah,
excited about this. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. So the way the whole thing went down, so we decided to repackage the ammo. And to hide the fact that it was Chinese, so we wouldn't take the risk of triggering some bureaucrat to cancel our contract. We hired some Albanian guy to do the repackaging. I think he's going to charge us like $100,000 to repackage 150 million rounds, and we were saving like $3 million in air freight costs. So it was a great deal. But of course, Efraim wanted to make more money. So once it started delivering on a regular basis, he decided to he tried to cut Henry out of the deal to negotiate directly with the Albanians. The Albanians told him, no, we're not cutting Henry out of the deal, probably because he was paying off the politicians who set this whole thing up. Not that we knew about it, but that's probably what was happening. And but the Albanians, they told him, he's like, but if you give us the contract to do the repackaging, then we'll give you a discount on the ammo, because we were using some third-party Albanian. And so Efraim was like, yeah, great, that guy's fired, you're hired, let's do this. And got a small discount on the ammo. The guy who he fired got stuck with $20,000 worth of boxes that Efraim refused to pay him for.
20 grand.
20 grand. And you just refused to pay him. He's like, yeah, fuck that guy. What's he going to do? He's not going to do anything, you know? And I told him, like, Efraim, you should probably pay him. He knows everything, you know? He's like, don't worry about him, you know? And so that guy got really pissed, as you could imagine, and he told the New York Times what we were doing.
So this guy had the foresight to think, I'm going to fuck these guys over by going to the New York Times.
Yeah. And he actually recorded Efraim secretly while talking to him on the phone and got him to admit that he thought that the guy he was dealing with was part of the Albanian mob, which has actually turned out to be true. It's like the guy who was I don't know how his involvement got there, but the guy who was connected to the prime minister's son, turned out, a guy named Mikhail Deliorgi, he turned out to be like the leader of the Albanian mafia. And so the box guy, Kosta Trebishka, he called up Efraim and he's like, you told me that this guy Deliorgi is part of the Albanian mob, right? I mean, he was like entrapping. And Diveroli's like, yeah, I think he is, but I don't want to know, you know? Not my business.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this conversation is on YouTube.
That's so funny. Not really for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, now it's funny, but yeah. So anyway, so Costa got pissed. He told the New York Times, and even bigger, the thing where he really went wrong is he told the local Albanian press that the Albanian politicians were getting kickbacks. And a week after that article was published, he winds up dead in a really mysterious. They found him in a field, in a dirt field on a dirt road, and his car had somehow run him over. Very suspicious, very suspicious. But the government ruled it an accident.
Oh dear.
But nobody thinks it was an accident.
Most people's cars don't run them over.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that. I guess they claimed he was trying to fix his tire, and then it went into neutral. I don't know what
the mental gymnastics.
So yeah.
Over 20 grand. Over
20 grand. Yeah. So then so the feds. So after that whole thing happened, the contract was being delivered on a regular basis. We had like 4 aircraft loads flying into Afghanistan every week. And then Efraim comes into my office and he says to me, he's like, a lot of the guys on the office are saying that, because at this point we had about 15 employees, we had like a little boiler room going. And he's like, a lot of the guys around the office are saying you're not pulling your weight around here anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The contract's going well. And he says, well, our Afghan contract's going well, but we're really struggling on these Iraq contracts, and you're not helping with that. And I said, well, I'm not getting a commission on that. I only get a commission. I'm not your employee. And he's like, yeah, but if our Iraq contracts go down, the whole company could go down, and that takes your Afghan contract with it. So you need to like help out with everything. And I said, well, you want to give me a piece of the company? Yeah. And he says, you know what, David, I've been thinking about this a lot. You're a big reason why AEY is doing so well. AEY was the company, He said, why we're doing so well. And I own 100% of this company and never thought I would give anyone a piece of it. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to offer you $100,000 a year executive salary plus 1% of AEY. And I said to him, well, the Afghan contract is going to make us like 90% of the money going in the next few years. And I'm supposed to get 25% of that. So I think I'll stick with that, and I'm going to make, I don't know, about like $15-20 million of it. So your $100,000 a year salary.
I'm good.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with what I got. And he goes to me, he's like, well, how about 0? Because that's the only offer on the table. And I said to him, well, in that case, go fuck yourself and I'll see you in court. And so I walked out. And about a month, we started negotiating.
At this time, this is when the article's being published?
No, not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay.
This is later.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll give you the chronological order. So I quit AEY I decided to, we negotiated. I was getting ready to sue him. My lawyer told me, well, this is going to take years to go through the lawsuit. Better to just negotiate something so you can move on with your life. We negotiated, I think it was like $300K. He owed me about $4 million at the time of what we had delivered. And I was like, you know what? I want to get him out of my life. I want to move on.
You were that willing.
I was about to go bankrupt because I had been living off, because I didn't pull a penny out of this the entire time. Because every time I'd win a contract, we were about to win another one by the time we got paid. And he's like, hey, I'm using my money to finance this contract. You just made a bunch of money from this contract. So why don't you roll your money into the next one to finance the next contract? I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's fair.
But what was the deal with the financing? Like, you should take your 25% out.
So he was using all his money to finance the contract.
He's the business owner. That's too bad, right?
Yeah. So that was how he portrayed it to me, is that I'm using my money to finance it. You just made a bunch of money. It's only fair you should use your money to finance it. It was still a tiny fraction of the money he was using. So he's like, I'm still financing most of it, but you got to have your skin in the game too. So I wasn't pulling any money out of this, and I was slowly using my $100,000 that I had in savings at the beginning of this, and I was down to like $20,000. And so I realized, man, if I don't make money soon, I'm gonna not be able to make rent. And I had a kid it was about 6 months old, so I had to start supporting my daughter. And I realized, after I was like super depressed after because I went from, I thought I was going to be a multimillionaire to I'm about to go bankrupt. And I realized, well, I know this business. I don't need him to do it. I could start bidding on contracts myself. But I needed money because that takes quite a few months to win your first contract usually. And there's no guarantee. And I had a kid to support, and there was
some strategy behind it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, you know what? I could either chase him for years to try to get the millions of dollars he owes me. And even if I win, I knew that he had offshore accounts in the Seychelles Islands and other places. He's probably going to hide his money.
Everything he does is just like really shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had zero doubt that he would try, that even if I won the court case, he would pull some shenanigans to avoid paying, to hide the money. And I thought, well, if we come to an agreement, yes, it's a tiny fraction of what he owes me, but at least it's guaranteed, and I'll have enough leeway to support myself and my kid until I get my feet off,
feet off the ground,
yeah,
and get
exactly.
your business running.
Exactly. So that's why I agreed to it. It was not because I thought it was fair.
No, that's super shitty.
Yeah,
that's so shitty. It's horrible.
Yeah. So the day we were supposed to sign the contract for our agreement, our settlement, the feds raid his office. And then my lawyer tells me, you can't take any money from him because then it looks like he's paying you off. So the feds raid his office. They find on his desk a handwritten to-do list. And one of the items on his handwritten to-do list is repackaged Chinese ammo. He could have said repackaged ammo.
He wrote repackaged Chinese ammo.
Repackaged Chinese ammo in his handwriting on his desk. And so I thought, okay, well, this is all going down from here on out. But then they didn't do anything, right? For like 6 months, they kept on the Army kept on taking delivery of the Chinese ammo after this. And I was like, okay, maybe they're not gonna, go after him.
And do the feds communicate with you?
Yeah. So they contacted me, and my lawyer, the first thing my lawyer told me, he's like, okay, the first thing you have to do is go through your emails and see if there's anything incriminating in there. And so I searched Chinese ammo, repackage, and there were a whole bunch of emails. And it was all very incriminating. At first, he had said, when we first started this whole thing, he was like, oh, we're only talking on the phone. Nobody's writing emails. But then he had insisted Alex send him pictures of the carts because he didn't trust Alex's assessment that this was Chinese characters. He wanted to see himself. So there is an email out of pictures of the Chinese boxes that he sent to Efraim and to me. And then one of our investors, Ralph, he had sent us an email with step-by-step instructions how to sand Chinese markings off wooden crates. And there was like pictures, and it was very incriminating. We knew the second I saw those emails, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to win this in court. And so my lawyer told me, he's like, well, how much justice can you afford? And I'm like, how much justice can I afford?
The beauty of an adversarial system.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, yeah, because like he's like, look, maybe we can get you off on a technicality, but it's going to cost you at least like $300K. Do you have that? I'm like, no, I don't have that. I'm about to go fucking bankrupt because this guy can't pay me. And he's like, well, in that case, you should probably plead guilty because you can't even put up a good fight. And anyway, there's a lot of evidence against you. So,
but at this point, you don't even like the feds raid, but you don't know that the feds are actually going to charge you with anything yet.
No. So, but they wanted to talk to me. And then the question was, do you stonewall them or do you talk to them?
And you start to play ball.
Yeah. So my lawyer told me, he's like, your only option here is to talk to them because you don't have enough money to defend yourself and there's a lot of incriminating evidence against you. So is my professional opinion, you should talk to the agents, be completely honest with them, tell them everything you know, and hopefully they won't go too hard on you. And so I did that. Alex also did that. And they told us originally the feds were like, oh, we're not going after you guys because you didn't even make any money from this. Really, Efraim is the target. And but then, they interviewed us. We told them what we knew. And then we didn't hear from them for like 6 months until February of 2008 or March 2008. The New York Times finally publishes their front page article about us, and it wasn't flattering. My mugshot and Efraim's mugshot were on the front page of the New York Times next to a picture of rusty-looking ammunition, which wasn't even the Chinese ammo. It was actually Bulgarian ammo that Efraim had bought sight unseen for a very low amount. It was like only 30,000 rounds.
Different deal.
It was a completely different deal. So the way that picture got on the front page of the New York Times was, we had the grenades were coming out of Bulgaria. And we had some extra room on the aircraft, and he had gotten an offer for like 30,000 rounds of AK-47 ammo for very, very cheap, even cheaper than like a quarter of the price of the Albanian ammo, which was already super low. But it was such a small quantity of ammo, it wasn't worth flying over there to inspect it. And he figured, if it's good, we'll make an enormous margin. If it's bad, I'm not paying that much for it. So why not? He rolled the dice. Turned out, obviously, it was crap. And it got to Afghanistan. The receiving officer took one look at it and he's like, I'm not paying for this garbage. But of course, they didn't want to pay to ship it back. And there's no ammunition recycling facilities in Afghanistan. So they just shoved it to the side of the airport and left it there. And it just kept on corroding in the open air and the rain. And so by the time the New York Times sent a reporter over there to
investigating you and all the stuff that you've done.
And they asked someone, can you show us some stuff that AEY delivered? They pointed to that. And that's the picture that ended up on the New York. And it's like really corroded, nasty looking stuff. And the way they wrote the article, it implied that all the stuff we delivered was of similar quality, which was not true. In fact, the Army stated in court later on that they were completely happy with the quality of the ammunition.
So, but still, that doesn't tie together why the feds decided to charge you, because the article comes out. Is it just because it's embarrassing?
Yes.
You feel like you genuinely believe that if that article didn't come out?
Absolutely. And so what happened? The article comes out. It creates a massive political firestorm. There were hearings in Congress. There's YouTube videos out there of some like senator with one of those big easels on the floor of Congress and with a picture of me and Efraim on there. He's like, and this is a 21-year-old, the company is owned by a 21-year-old whose vice president is a licensed massage therapist. I was working as a massage therapist back then. And, these are the gentlemen who the Bush administration is entrusting to supply a critical, component of the war on terror, So it became a big political scandal. And like a way to embarrass the Bush administration. And the Army, 2 days later, put out a statement. We had no idea any of this was happening. We're canceling the contract. And it came out later in court because Ralph took it to court. Efraim and I and Alex all pled guilty. But Ralph took it to court, so there was a lot of discovery that came out during that process. And so the email, after the feds raided the office in August of 2007, they had sent, the Justice Department sent an email to the U.S. Army telling them, this stuff is Chinese, you may want to stop taking delivery on it. The Army sent them back an email saying, this ammunition is critical to the mission in Afghanistan, and if you want us to stop taking delivery on it, we're going to need a letter from the Attorney General of the United States instructing us to stop taking delivery. And that letter never came. So they kept on taking delivery for another 6 months, kept on paying Efraim with every shipment. And even after they were directly informed in writing that it was Chinese ammunition, they didn't care. And because as far as they were concerned, it met all the qualifications of what they needed. And it's the Justice Department's job to enforce the laws, and they were not telling them to stop, at least not officially. So, they said you may want to stop. They kind of give it as a suggestion, and they're like, well, we're not going to take your suggestion because this is important. We need it. But if you want to order us to stop, it's going to need to come from the Attorney General. And the Attorney General never decided to send that letter.
So why do you think still they proceeded with charging you, even though they knew that this was happening behind closed doors, and even though the ammo was...
Because they wanted to cover their own asses. That's the... Once the New York Times created this political scandal, they had to look like they were doing something about it, right? So that's why the Army canceled the contract. And then about a week later, the Justice Department came back to my lawyer and they said, hey, I know we said that we wouldn't charge you with any of this, but we're sorry. You're too close to the, and also Alex, who was on the ground in Albania. You guys are just too close to the, and too essential to the whole operation for us to charge Efraim and not charge you. And so the way they charged us was they said, you guys delivered 71 aircraft loads of this Chinese ammunition to Albania. And in each aircraft, you supplied with the ammunition a document called the Certificate of Conformance. And the Certificate of Conformance listed the type of ammunition that was on board, the quantity, the year of manufacture, and most importantly, the place of origin. And the place of origin line, you put Albania, and you knew it was really China. And not only did you know it was China, you had a whole operation to disguise that it was China. So this submission of this document is an act of fraud. And you did this 71 times. 71 counts of fraud, and each one could get you 5 years in prison. So you're looking at 355 years in prison if you fight us. But if you plead guilty, we'll combine all those 71 counts into one. As prosecutors, they've got the power to do that. And so the max you're looking at, if you plead guilty, is 5 years in prison. But because you plead guilty, we're going to tell the judge that you cooperated and that you regret your actions. You'll be a good citizen from now on, and so we'll recommend to the judge that the judge give you the low end of the guidelines. So maybe you'll get one, maybe just probation. Up to the judge, not our call.
That's very scary though.
Yeah,
dealing with it.
Exactly. So that's the choice they give you. You want to spend the rest of your life in prison, or maybe nothing. But you have to plead.
So when they're going through this whole process, like it's not like they haven't arrested you or anything like that at this point. Like it's a very almost like a negotiation over your life.
Yeah,
it must be interesting. Like, I mean, hopefully not a lot of people that are listening to this have ever gone through that.
I don't recommend it.
But you're actually just like what are the thoughts that are going through your head when you're dealing with this whole process?
I might be fucked. That's what I'm thinking. My entire life could be ruined right now. I could miss decades of my life. I can miss my daughter growing up. I may have just royally fucked myself over in my entire life and let everyone down. That's what was going through my head.
And so you agreed to pleading guilty.
Of course, I've agreed to pleading guilty. There's not really much of a choice. Even if I wanted to fight them, I didn't have the money to fight them in court because, as my lawyer said, I couldn't afford much justice.
This was kind of a bullshit charge. Like it seems like it was a bullshit charge because it's just covering everyone's ass. Looking back, you still feel that.
Yeah, I mean, if they really cared about it, they would have brought charges against us when they first found out about it. Not 6 months later, right after the New York Times article got published. The timing there was just too suspicious. It wasn't like they were preparing to bring charges and then they just happened to be ready 1 week after the New York Times published. That's unlikely. They probably prepared the case. They're like, we could bring this case. Maybe we shouldn't bring the case. The Army seems to feel this is important that this continues. So we'll kind of let it slip under the rug. No harm, no foul. But until it became a political football, until it became a scandal. And then career bureaucrats, need to cover themselves. That's kind of how.
How do you prep for this? Like, I mean, you have a kid. You were married at the time?
I was married.
Married. Okay, so how are you prepping for this? Like going into this, because at the end of the day, you got 7 months probation or house arrest. House arrest. Well, how do you prep for this kind of event?
You mean like this?
It's like the sentencing, like the whole
Right.
like walk me through that.
Right. So the way it worked was they brought about like a week after the New York Times article got published, they brought charges against us. You know, we negotiated, we pled guilty. Efraim tried fighting them for another like few months, but then realized that it was lost cause.
You think that's why he bought more time?
No, there's a reason why he got more time than me, and that's a whole other story. It's actually kind of a funny story, but to me, not to him, I'm sure. But so I'll get to that.
Yeah, no, I'm listening.
Alex and I pled guilty immediately. We didn't really have a choice. Efraim tried to fight him for another few months. Eventually, he pled guilty too because he realized the evidence against him was too strong. But Ralph decided to take it to court, our investor. And because he decided to take it to court, they didn't want to sentence us until his trial was over. Because in case they wanted to call us as witnesses in his trial, they wanted to have leverage against us. So they didn't want to sentence us. So we were kind of stuck in limbo until his whole trial was over. He went to trial twice. The first time was a hung jury. Then they did the whole thing again and finally convicted him. Took 3 years, that entire process. So during that 3-year period, the prosecutors told us, you guys have to stay out of the arms business. You can't do government contracting. And my lawyer told me, go get a job that will make you look good to the judge. And so I got a job at a nonprofit, at a food bank.
Get out.
Yeah.
That's about as good as you
Yeah, exactly. I was terrified.
Of course.
You know, I was looking at decades in prison. I got a job at a food bank. I went back to school, started studying mechanical engineering. I even started doing massage therapy again.
You're just praying for what's on the other side.
Exactly.
Hammer that's coming down.
Exactly. And I didn't know when it was. I didn't know how long this process was going to take. I was hoping it was going to be. My lawyer said, it could be anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years. You know, you don't know. Exactly. And so I did that. And Efraim has a higher tolerance for risk. So he officially shut down his arms business, but he had his newest lackey. So after I quit, he hired someone else to take over my job. He ended up screwing that guy over too. That guy quit. And then he had another guy who replaced that guy. That guy, he got to start a company under his own name. And he started doing the arms business under his lackey's name, corporate name.
Using it as a proxy.
Exactly, as a proxy. He tried to do this, but the thing is, when he's a real control freak, and he's really good at negotiating. So when it came down to actually negotiating a deal, he'd grab the phone and start talking himself. And so he tried to do this deal with a gun dealer who's based out of Central Florida. The gun dealer, after he started talking directly to Efraim, realized who Efraim was, and he called up the ATF, now called Tobacco Firearms Administration, who regulates firearms in the United States, called up the ATF and told him, hey, I have this, because, Efraim was in the newspapers and all that. So he's like, I have this convicted arms dealer who's trying to do an arms deal with me. What should I do? Because he probably thought Ephraim's trying to entrap him into something to get a reduction on his sentence. A very reasonable assumption. And so the ATF tells him, well, why don't you introduce one of our undercover agents as your partner? The gun dealer does that. And the undercover agent tells Efraim, I'm the kind of guy who needs to look you in the eye and shake your hand before we do a deal, And Efraim goes, oh yeah, I'm that kind of guy too. This is how men do business, And and he's like, so why don't you come up to the Orlando area and we'll meet and we'll close this deal. And, and he knew that Efraim was out on bond and not allowed to leave the Southern District of Florida.
Definitely not allowed to do business.
And definitely not allowed to do this kind of business. And so Ephraim's like, okay, I'll be up there next weekend. So he goes up to meet the agent, not knowing he's the undercover agent, right? And the undercover agent meets with him, pops the trunk of his car, and he says, hey, check that out, because he knew that Efraim was already a convicted felon, right, because he had pled guilty. And in the United States, it's illegal for a felon to be in possession of a firearm. You can get up to 10 years in prison just for picking up a gun as a convicted felon. Now, it's also illegal for someone to knowingly hand a felon a firearm. So what he does is he pops open the trunk of his car and he says, check out that gun I've got in there. It's the latest, greatest HK on the market. And Efraim, who's a gun nut, says, oh, I heard about that thing. Let me see that. Let's go to the range and fire off a few rounds. What can I say? Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Am I right? The agent slaps the cuffs on him. He's like, you're a felon in possession of a firearm. And you're under arrest. And he could have gotten 10 years for that because he had violated the terms of his bond. They didn't give him another bond. So he had to spend like a year in county jail in Central Florida, which is no picnic. Eventually he could have gotten 5 years. He had invalidated his plea agreement, right? Because part of the plea agreement you make when you plead guilty, it's an agreement with the prosecutor.
This is pre-sentencing.
This is pre-sentencing, right? Ralph had not been finished his trial yet. So he hadn't been sentenced for the fraud charge. And part of the plea agreement is you will commit no more crimes before you get sentenced. Because how the prosecutor is going to tell the judge that you're a reformed individual, you're a good citizen from now on if you're going out there and committing more crimes before you even get sentenced. So he invalidated his plea agreement. The prosecutors said, oh, you should throw the book at this guy. He doesn't respect the law, and he needs to learn a lesson. So he could have gotten 5 years total for the fraud charge that he had pled guilty to, another 10 years for the gun charge. He hired the best lawyers in Miami. They negotiated hard. They got it down to 4 years. So instead of 15 years total, he ended up getting sentenced to 4 years for both things. He ended up serving like 3.5 years, got out for like good behavior drug program. And now he's out and about on the streets of Miami, screwing people left and right.
You think still?
Oh, I know so. Because every few years I get someone call me up and they're like, I made the big mistake of going into business with him and now I have to sue him because he just screwed me in this, that, and the other way. And
nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. He's the same guy. He's the same exact guy.
What businesses does he do now?
So from what I've heard, he is in the business of financing lawsuits because so many people have sued him. And he's done a whole bunch of frivolous lawsuits. He sued, I think it was like GlaxoSmithKline, the big pharmaceutical company, because he claimed his psychiatric medication turned him into a drug, sex, and gambling addict, and that he lost millions of dollars doing all that. While he was awaiting sentencing, from what
You can sue a drug company for that?
I don't know if he was successful, but he did sue them.
You'll probably look it up.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you probably can look it up.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah. So
At least it's crazy what you can sue for.
Oh, you could sue for anything.
I'm Canadian. This is very, I don't think I know anybody that sued anybody for like having too much fun on the weekend for it.
Sue anyone. So he got really good at suing and he got really good at getting out of lawsuits because he screws everyone over, so everyone sues him eventually. And so he got to know the legal system really well. And so now he finances lawsuits. And I have no doubt that the deals he makes, he gets like 90% of the winnings and then he figures out some way to screw the guy out of the last 10%. So, because that's just how he rolls. So that's what he does now. I've heard he's trying to get into some other businesses, but I don't know, whether
But maybe you don't invest.
Yeah. I would not recommend anybody go into business. Have you spoken to him since? The only time I spoke to him since he went to prison was I sued him years later, and he went through a deposition. And so I saw him in a deposition where we had our lawyers in the room. We ended up settling, for way less than I should have, just because there was some evidence that had mysteriously disappeared that made my case weaker, and it was going to cost me a lot of money to do an investigation, and I didn't want to spend the time. I was already moved on to other businesses, and I just wanted him out of my life. So yeah, we ended up settling for a tiny fraction of what he owed me. But and the truth is, I don't regret it because I'm just glad he's not in my life anymore.
Yeah, that was a hectic year and a half.
Yeah, it was. And then 3 years fallout.
3 years fallout.
So I got sentenced, But I got sentenced to 7 months of house arrest.
Which is probably like the best possible outcome.
It was I felt extremely fortunate. Yeah.
Did you spend any time in jail at all?
Just so when they brought charges against us, you have to go in to get the judge to issue you a bond. So they have like a way to, you know, to get you back in court if they want to. And so, but they didn't, it wasn't like in the movie where they sent the FBI to our house to arrest us. We were already in negotiations with the prosecutors through our lawyers. So the prosecutors told us, oh, just do a self-surrender, they call it. So you just walk down to
This is when non-violent,
Yeah, exactly. When they don't think that you're a flight risk. Yeah. So if they don't think you're a flight risk and you haven't committed anything violent or anything like that, and you're already and it's not going to be a surprise. You know, you're already in negotiations. They'll be like, you could they give you the option to self-surrender, they call it. You just walk down to the courthouse. They kept me in like a little holding cell for a few hours. They put you in cuffs, and you walk out to the judge. The judge looks at your case, says, okay, your bond is X amount. And, you know, so they did the same thing for him. But then later on, he got arrested, you know, through the sting operation with the ATF, and then they kept him in jail.
Do you think he would have gotten the same amount of jail time as you if he wasn't an idiot?
I think he would have gotten more than me just because he was the ringleader and the kingpin, they call it. But he definitely would have gotten a lot less than 4 years. Yeah, 100%. If I had to guess, and it's just a guess because you don't know what the judge would have given him, he probably would have gotten a year. That's what I think he would have gotten.
So 7 years house arrest. This is when you
7
start.
months.
Or, sorry, my goodness, 7 months house arrest. This is when you start to figure out what's next in your life.
Exactly.
It was when you started
Yes.
other businesses, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it was actually, so the house arrest turned out to be one of the biggest blessings in my life. It's kind of funny how that goes, you know. I was under house arrest, which I felt very, very lucky to get because house arrest is heaven compared to prison.
House arrest is what people do. Some people do anyways.
Exactly. You have your own, you can watch TV, you have your own refrigerator, your own bathroom, you know, very important. Don't have to worry about dropping the soap, you know. So, yeah, I felt very, very lucky that I got that I avoided prison. I got to spend a lot of time with my daughter, which was really nice. But I was bored, you know, as I played a lot of guitar. I'm a guitarist, so and it wasn't like a COVID style house like lockdown where people can't visit you. So I had a lot of my musician friends come over, we jam, it wasn't so bad. But of course, no drummer is going to bring his drum set over my house because it's a massive pain to move a drum set. So I really miss playing with the drummer. So the drums give the music the energy, you know, you dance to the beat. So I bought a drum machine, which is this electronic device. It goes on the table. It's mainly designed to compose beats. It's got a bunch of buttons on it. Each one makes a different drum sound. You can make the beats on it, and then it plays it back in a loop.
It's what like a producer would use.
Yes, exactly. It's what producers use to make beats.
Yeah.
But I was using it so I'd have beat to play to with my guitar. But every time I wanted to change the beat, like when you go from verse to chorus in a song, the beat usually gets harder. So I'd have to stop playing my guitar, press the button on the machine to change the beat, and go back to playing my guitar, and interrupted the flow of the music. And I was like, this really sucks. I wish I could do that hands-free. Like I wanted a drum machine in the form of a pedal on the floor so I could control it hands-free. And so I was sure someone made something like this. So I went online to look for it, and I couldn't find anything. And I asked my musician friends if they'd seen anything like that. And they're like, I'd never seen anything like it, but when you find it, let me know because I want one too. That sounds super cool. And so I thought, if nobody's making it, everybody wants it, you know, I should make this thing. And of course, I'd never made any electronic product in my life. I've never developed anything. So I knew nothing about it. So I started Googling, you know, how to develop electronic products. And I found a whole bunch of engineering firms that promised to take your idea from napkin sketch to store shelves. That was the tagline.
That's a good pitch.
Yeah, it's a good pitch.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of them, and I didn't know which one to pick. And the price ranges were like all over the place. It was like, for this particular product, I ended up calling it the BeatBuddy, like your buddy that plays the beat. And it was like, I got the lowest price was like $30,000 to develop it just for the engineering, not manufacturing. The highest price was about $300,000. So I had about, at this point, I had about like $25,000 saved up from like doing massages. And because I had spent all my money on lawyers to keep me out of prison. And even to plead guilty, it cost me 30 grand.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. To
Lawyers.
do the negotiations.
You
Yeah.
had to listen to your dad, and no, I'm just kidding.
You know, in business, I've met lawyers who charge like $1,500 an hour. And I'm like, no engineer in the world charges that much.
I mean, when the horses are so silly.
Yeah.
If you can't agree, you're going to spend. I mean,
the lawyers get all the money.
they did all the lawyers always win.
The lawyers win. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I had no idea which one to pick. So of course I made the classic mistake, just going with the cheapest guy. He ended up wasting like 9 months, I realized he wasn't going to build it. I managed to get my money back because I had hired him through, it was called Odesk, which is similar to Upwork, like one of these sites. And so I had some leverage on him. But then I realized, you know what? I'm going to pick the guys who seem like they are the most competent instead of the cheapest. And it wasn't even the most expensive. These guys were like 130 grand. They're a Canadian company, actually, out of Montreal. And but of course, I didn't have 130 grand. So I told them that. I'm like, hey, I only have 25 grand. But I'm planning on doing a crowdfunding campaign to do manufacturing. So they told me, look, we really want to get into this field because all of our other projects have been for like big companies, B2B or governments, and we want to do something consumer facing. And this is a super cool product. And the founder of their company, the lead engineer, was a drummer. And he's like, I know this is going to do really well because I have so many friends want to jam with me and I don't have time to jam with them because I'm running an engineering company, but they're going to love this thing. So he made me a special deal, which is an incredible deal. I'm very grateful for it. I gave him all my money, pretty much every penny I had, 25 grand as a down payment. And they built me a functional prototype that I could then take to crowdfunding. And the deal was I would use the crowdfunding money to pay them back. They held the engineering files as collateral so that I couldn't run off and not pay them. And if I would use the crowdfunding money to pay them back. And if I didn't make enough money on the crowdfunding, they would do the manufacturing and get a cut of the profits until they got paid back everything. Amazing. Yeah, which was an incredible deal. And that made me feel really confident they were going to do a good job because if they didn't make a functional product, they weren't going to get paid the rest of the money. So I was like, these guys are going to do the job. And they did an amazing job. And so I created that product. The crowdfunding campaign raised $350,000 in 1 month.
How do you know, because that's a great crowdfunding campaign. That's super. And your past entrepreneur experience, I mean, really, you haven't had to find product market fit for anything yet until this. But usually I guess it's because you solved the problem you had. That was probably what allowed you to ping.
I knew I wanted it.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted it really badly.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this would be so much fun to play with. And I could use it to practice at home, to write songs, to do like little one-man band gigs, like in coffee shops. And every musician I talked to about it was like, that's a great idea. That I can't believe nobody's made that. That was the same line. I can't believe. He's like, are you sure nobody's made anything like this?
That's that line.
Yeah, people were like, are you sure nobody's made it? I thought I saw something. I'm like, oh, find it. Let me know. And they're like, everyone thought someone made it, but no one actually made it. So I knew that it was going to be a successful product. And my only question was how much it was going to have to cost and whether people would be willing to spend it. And for that, I got a whole rate because I'd ask every musician I talked to about it, I'm like, what would you pay for this? And I got everything from like, I wouldn't pay more than $100 to I'd pay, oh, this is awesome. I'd pay $500 or even some people said $1,000. And then it turned out that I had to make it profitable. It had to be around a little under $400. And which was still in the range. And luckily, most musicians thought that was a great price point. And this was like we did our crowdfunding campaign in early 2014, almost 10 years ago, and it just like took off. So I posted in it wasn't even me, like other people were really excited about it. And they posted in like all the musician forums and Facebook groups.
I want to take a second and thank Range Rover Sport for supporting today's episode. Now, let's talk about tools that match your ambition, that match the ambition of everybody who's listening today, who has taken risks, who has up-leveled their personal, professional development, who has tried to build their own thing. Everybody listening gets it. There is a moment when the thing you're trying to build, the challenge that you're taking on, it finally starts to take off. There's like this rush of excitement and possibility, and that feeling that you get when you get behind of the wheel of a Range Rover Sport, because we've all had that perfect drive when the road, the car, and you're all in perfect harmony. But that's not just by chance. The Range Rover Sport is designed to make every drive feel that way. And the Range Rover Sport is not just for impressing others, it's how you feel behind the wheel. It's how you feel when things are going the way they're supposed to go. Whether or not you're navigating city streets, you're exploring back roads, the Range Rover Sport combines refinement with a sense of adventure. It matches your own versatile lifestyle. With features like adaptive off-road cruise control, you can tackle challenging terrain with confidence. The dynamic air suspension always makes sure you get a smooth ride. It responds to road conditions for optimal performance. So from daily commutes to weekend getaways, the Range Rover Sport is ready for whatever you have planned. It's more than just a vehicle. It is a companion for all of your journey. So if you're ready to elevate your driving experience, visit LandRoverUSA.com and configure your Range Rover Sport today.
So you like tapped into these like super niche communities, and then and that's actually the best kind of marketing. Exactly. When you have your customers like marketing it for you. And I think that like everything you did, it's so funny because so many people go through so many versions of entrepreneurship and so many failures before they figure out some of these things that happened for you or because of you or whatever. But a lot of people are like forcing products on the market.
Right.
And there is no product market fit and there is no customer base. And you're doing all the right things. I mean, good on you for figuring this out. But I mean, you're interviewing people, you're speaking to the customer, you're solving your own pain points. You're finding these niche communities that nobody that will market for you and evangelize your product for you. So very smart, very, very smart. Because I don't think a lot of people intuitively do that when they try and start really their first product company.
Right. Yeah, it just made sense to me. Like
Very
time. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the product was strong enough that it sold itself. And I think that's why it was so successful, because it addressed such a need in the market that nobody else was doing. So that was my first product, my first invention. I got a patent for it in less than a year, which was unbelievable. Usually it takes like 2 to 3 years. That was how I launched my company, Singular Sound. And since then, I've created a whole bunch of other music-related products for the musicians out there. I've made the world's most advanced looping pedal. It's called the Aeros Loop Studio, and it talks to the BeatBuddy, and they you can like they talk with MIDI to each other, so everything's like lined up, the loops and the beats. And we also created one of the best MIDI foot controllers, which controls the other products. We also created the Cably, which is this cable winding device, because it's all for issues I had. Like I was playing shows and I had a whole bunch of cables and it was taking me forever to wrap it on I'm like, I need just a little wheel that I can wrap it up. And so that was like, that's our cheapest product. It's like a $20 product.
And when you try to build a business like this, so you crowdfunded, you got some initial traction. I mean, like, we don't have to go through every single component of building a business, but when you think about like sales, marketing, distribution, what was a strategy that worked really well for you?
So because we started with crowdfunding, we started with direct to consumer, right? So like even after the crowdfunding campaign ended, we continued taking orders on our website. And by the time we actually manufactured and delivered the product, we went from like 350,000 in sales in that first month to about like 1.5 million, like 8 months later.
It's not bad.
Yeah, no,
that's pretty year one.
Yeah, year one. Before the product even hit the market.
Yeah, that's actually really not bad.
Yeah. Which was, so that gave us enough money to do the manufacturing. I spent like 3 months in China to make sure they were doing it. It was supposed to be 1 month, but that's how it goes. To spend a lot of time in China to do the manufacturing. And we delivered the first BeatBuddy units to customers almost exactly 10 years ago. And we're actually about to release our 10-year anniversary edition. It's going to be really cool.
How's the business? So how has the business grown?
Yeah.
Because you have production in China. You have to manage that supply chain. I'm assuming that it's a hardware business. So it's not like super high margins compared to other types of businesses. It's software. Yeah. So like, how have you grown that bit? Like think about like the main strategic items that really help take that business to where it is today.
Right. So it's we started with the BeatBuddy as our core flagship product, and then we kind of built from there on. And my the strategy I used was when people would say, "Oh, I really wish I had," like our customers would say, "I really wish I had this." So the way I came up with the Aeros Loop Studio, for example, was people were like, "The BeatBuddy's awesome. It's an amazing drum machine. I'm trying to sync it to my looper pedal." Right? A looper pedal, for people who don't know, is a device that records your instrument's music and plays it back in a loop. And if that loop isn't the same length as the beat loop, then they go out of sync every time they cycle around, and then it sounds like shit. So there is a protocol, a digital protocol called MIDI, which musical devices use to talk to each other, but the loopers on the market, they weren't particularly good at this syncing device, so they're syncing system. So people were complaining, "Oh, I wish I could do this, and this with my looper pedal, but I can't." Right? Like, I wish when I switched song parts from verse to chorus, it would go to a different loop because, it doesn't make sense.
But you're talking to your customers the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
You build these feedback loops in your business. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. Because we sold mainly directly to consumer at first. So we had a pretty big mailing list, and we also created a forum on our website where people can interact with each other. Because the BeatBuddy, you could put your own content on there too. You could make your own beats. You could make your own drum sets. We have software that you could organize it into the BeatBuddy format. So people make a lot of content, make a lot of beats and drum sets, and they post it on the forum for other people to download. So there's a lot of constantly evolving and increasing content. We also make professional stuff that we
built a whole community around.
Exactly. We built a whole community. So we get a lot of feedback through that community, a lot of feature requests, more than we can ever work on. But but occasionally we'll be like, "Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea." And then we kind of like sift through all the requests, and we're like, "Okay, this is going to make the biggest difference to the community, to the customer base." And that's kind of how we decide our development goals. And so that, people were complaining about the loopers on the market, how they were difficult to use, they weren't functionally working well. And so, I'd never done looping because I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm more of like singing and doing songs, covers and stuff like that. So looping is more of like an instrumentalist kind of thing. So I'd never really done looping, but I bought a few loopers to test it, to see, because people were complaining about it. And it was just such a pain to use these loopers. I'm like, "Oh, I could easily make a way better looper than this." It's like just the biggest feature that's noticed that people realize, that made me realize this, was loopers. Right? They before we came out with our product, they didn't have like any screens on them. Right? So when you record a loop, especially if it's a long loop, you kind of have to know where the loop ends and begins. Because like, let's say you're switching to a different loop, it'll only switch at the end of that loop. And if you have a song, like if it's a rhythm section that's the same few chords a few times over, you can lose track of where you are in the loop. And then you think you're over at like the second measure, but you're really on the fourth, and then you'll mess yourself up. So I realized, well, there's already like these DAWs, right? Digital audio workstations, where you see the waveform on the screen. Why don't we just put that in the looper so you could actually see what you're recording and see how close you are to the end of the loop, and gives you that visual feedback. And so that was like the big innovation that we came up with for the Aeros Loop Studio, is that it's an actual visual looper. That's one thing. We've had quite a few different.
And that's where, like, when you think about these new inventions that you bring into your product line, are there outside of speaking to your customers, because again, you get so many different feature requests and product requests, is there a signal that one is going to be a hit? Like how do you measure that signal in the market, that one is going to be an absolute hit, and that's what you focus your time and energy on?
Yeah, it's it really goes to like how many people are asking for this, like how big is the pain point, right? And how big is the market really? Right. And it's sometimes a little difficult to assess the size of the market, especially in the niche markets. So we've done very well, it's a multi-million-dollar business now, Singular Sound. And we've won a whole bunch of industry awards, and a lot of famous musicians use our products. And it's really we have a pretty good reputation in the market. And we've done that because we've addressed the common complaints that musicians have about products. So people have been complaining for years about how drum machines are too complicated and, not easy to use, and you have to read a huge thick manual, and nobody likes to read, right? Except for the Germans. The Germans love to read manuals.
The rest of the world hates
right,
manuals.
especially Americans don't read any manuals. It's either like a quick start video, or nothing. They don't even want to read anything. So you have to make it super dead simple to use. And so that's kind of how we address things. When we see a lot of complaints in the market and I have an idea to address that issue, if there's enough complaints about it, then I know it's a good thing to work on. But the issue with and I'm not complaining because we've done so well in the niche, but my brother who helped me build Singular Sound, so I'm one of 9 children, and so after my whole falling out with Efraim, I was like, so traumatized from like having such a bad business partner. I was like, I need someone I could trust. And so I partnered with one of my brothers to help me build Singular Sound. He's not a musician, but he's a very methodical, organized person. And so I had the idea and he would break it down into steps and sub-steps. And like, he's like one of those people, he loves spreadsheets. He's like one of those guys. So
Useful. Not my kind.
no, I mean, we all play our role, So
I can't deal with spreadsheets.
no,
They're very useful.
but it's good to be partners with someone who does.
Yes, correct.
So he helped me build Singular Sound, and we have a great partnership. But he was always complaining to me that we're in a niche business, and there is only so far you could grow because only like 10% of people would consider themselves musicians, and maybe 10% of musicians want to get really high end, sophisticated gear like what we make. So our addressable market is like 1% of the population. We still have done very well because we filled that niche very well. But he was always complaining to me, we need to invent something for the mass market. And so
More crowded, but
it's more crowded. But if we can come up with something innovative, the market size is literally 100 times bigger. And so we were hanging out at my house. This is a few years ago. And we were smoking some weed, and we got the munchies, and we ate some mango, because mango's sweet and delicious. But of course, you get the fibers of the mango.
Of course, that's why I can't stand mango. That is literally the only reason I can't stand mango.
Exactly.
It's so annoying to get out of your teeth.
Yeah, exactly. And so afterwards, he asked me for some dental floss. We'll go to my bathroom to floss our teeth, and I complain. I'm like, oh, this is such a pain in the ass. I hate flossing. If we could invent a machine that flosses your teeth for you, that would do. And he looks at me, he's like, oh my God, everyone would buy that. We have to come up with something.
Yeah.
And so we started spitballing ideas. Eventually we landed on a product, on a design that we called InstaFloss, like Instagram, but flossing. And here I actually have our big innovation is the head, right? So
Let me see that.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Here
I'm so curious.
Yeah.
How does this work?
So this is just the head.
Sorry.
Yeah. This is just the head. So it's a water flosser, uses streams of water. So currently there's the water pick, right, which is the most famous water flosser out there. It was invented in like the 70s, 80s. But it's just a single stream of water. And the problem with the water pick is that you have to do it 90 degrees to the gum line. Because if you go into the gum line, it irritates your gum. If you go down, it's not effective. So if you go 90 degrees to the gum line, you have to trace your gum line, the gum line top, bottom, and even more difficult on the inside, pointing out to get a complete floss. And most people, when they use this, they spray, they make a big mess, and they're like,
by the way, I have one.
Yeah.
And not only have we stopped using it because the little spray thing snapped off, besides that, but when I did use it, like the bathroom would be like just water everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, water everywhere. Yeah.
And so that's the problem that's why most people don't use water flossers, is because it makes a big mess unless you learn to use it properly, and it has a bit of a learning curve and it takes some time, So what we did is we created this thing, which uses like an H-shaped manifold, and we have instead of one water jet, we have 12 water jets pointing on either side of the tooth, top and bottom. So all you have to do
I understand exactly.
you just go like this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you twiddle, and that's it.
That's so I'm buying
And
one.
it gets you
I'm
both.
totally buying one.
It gets top, bottom, and both sides of the tooth, outside and inside, all at the same time. And so you could have a complete, effective, comfortable floss in 10 seconds without making a huge mess. You just lean over the sink and all the water goes down in the sink.
How do you, you have the idea to tackle this market.
Yeah.
I find I find inventors fascinating because it's like you have to figure out the mechanics of building this physical thing. I come from a software world where you create software to solve a problem, but it's usually like a workflow problem in somebody's business, for example. This is like you have to find a physical thing, and you have to find the right. I mean, in software, it's like servers, servers and code. That's it. For this, you got to find material, you got to find supply chain, you got to find material manufacturer, and you got to source that from.
So the InstaFloss was the hardest product I ever worked on, by far. Like even the BeatBuddy is a sophisticated product. It's like a little computer in a pedal, and it has firmware and software and it's electrical design and all that. But InstaFloss was actually way harder because there were so many details that we had to figure out. First of all, we had to figure out if it was effective, right? This is going to be gross, but the way they do tests on dental items, they use pig's teeth because pigs actually have very similar teeth to humans. It's strange, but true. And so we went to a butcher shop and we bought the pig heads and we had them cut it lengthwise so we'd have access to the teeth. So there was like about a half a year where we had a bunch of like frozen pig heads in the freezer of our office, and we were like using that to do testing. We'd like dye the teeth and then use the machine and see like the how well it would remove the dye. And so we had to do a lot of testing on that. We had to really experiment with like the spacing of the device, of like how close to the teeth it needs to be. We had to experiment with the shape of the channels that the water goes through so that the water droplets hit your gum line at a specific, like with enough pointiness. Because if it's too broad, doesn't have enough pressure. We had to experiment with how much water pressure, how much water volume, what electrical motors and like the assembly characteristics of how you put all these things together so they don't leak over time because you're using a lot of water pressure and vibrations. And so it was like a Rubik's Cube that every time you fix one thing, you break another. And that's why it took us a very long time to actually.
And then this is mass market. So different kind of take to market strategy. So people kind of treat their teeth the same way, and they have been treating them for years and years and years. And behavior modification in business is very difficult because I've tried to build things that have not been successful due to behavior modification. So how do you actually?
People are creatures of habit.
Very much so. Very, very much so. So how do you make this? Is it successful?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It is. Okay.
So, yeah.
How do you make it successful? How do you do?
Well, we did a crowdfunding campaign for this too.
Why do you do that for your businesses now, as opposed to just?
Well, because we needed the money.
But I mean, you had one business. You didn't want to like blur the lines and fund.
Well, first of all, I was developing new products for that business, which takes a lot of money. So while we were developing InstaFloss, we were also developing the Aero Slooper, and which was our by far most sophisticated product that we've ever made. And it took quite a few years to make it and took a lot of engineering money. And then because it's a hardware business, you have to make the molds and you have to make the first production run. And that all takes a lot of upfront money before you can start selling it and actually pull money in. So that's why we did a crowdfunding campaign. But it went very well. We raised about $1 million on Kickstarter with the InstaFloss crowdfunding campaign. And we just started delivering InstaFloss actually just a few months ago to our first customers. And we've already gotten people writing us back. My dentist says he can't believe how good my gums are, so
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And when you think about first of all, it's a fabulous product. I didn't realize it was so recent.
Yeah.
But
I've been working on it for a long time.
Yeah, I know.
But it just hit the market recently.
So this is not like you're not paying me to say this, but I'm gonna get this. So if I can go buy it, tell me where can you get it? Actually,
Instafloss.com.
Okay, cool.
Like Instagram, but flossing.
I love
Instafloss.com.
When you think about marketing or taking to market these products outside of Kickstarter, which is going to lead to like your first customer base and word of mouth, for products like this, do you think we're going to go to the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world? Probably not right away because we don't have revenue yet. We go through distributors, we go through channel partners, we go through dentists, we could go through influencers. Like there's a million different ways to market a company. when you have a mass market product, where do you go first?
So our strategy is we're going direct to consumer first, which is we did through the crowdfunding campaign, and we're also selling it direct through to consumer through our website. And the reason we do that, well, first of all, you have the highest margins, right? Because you don't have to give Walmart a cut and the distributors a cut and all that.
But you have shipping costs.
We have shipping costs, yes, but you still, Walmart takes like half of your money, you know? So it's the shipping cost is a small amount of that. Storage costs, you still make way more money if you sell it direct. It all depends on how much it costs you to market that, of course. You know, you can spend unlimited amounts of money on marketing. So all your profit margin could go into marketing. But another reason we wanted to do direct to consumer first is in case there were any issues with the product, we would have that direct line of communication. People will say, hey, my product is not functional in this way, or I have this problem. I wish it did this different. And we've had a few of those issues. There's always manufacturing issues in the beginning. And so we've had to fix a few of those. And that's why we're glad, because Walmart would have just sent the entire shipment back. And
you burn that relationship.
And you burn the relationship. So we wanted to really dial it in and make sure that we had, you know, the entire product perfect before we start scaling up. And so we're actually currently right now in the stage where we've finally nailed down all the manufacturing issues, and we're ready to start scaling up. So yeah, we're actually in the middle of raising a fundraising round.
You're direct consumer. From what I've heard from people that have launched consumer brands and direct consumer brands, the traditional way that you'd sell direct to consumer, because you don't have a channel like Amazon that's distributing it for you, don't have organic reach per se. So instead of jumping on podcasts, you rely a lot on ads.
Right.
And ads in 2024 post iOS update, it's very hard to get positive ROAS on ads for cheaper products. So except if they have a high lifetime value or there's a subscription product or something like that. So how do you make it profitable? How do you make a product like that that's kind of like a one-time sale, or is it? I don't know.
So we do have recurring revenue from it, because you do, as with all dental products like your toothbrush, you do need to replace the head. That's the part
that looks well built. So how often do you replace?
So the recommended replacement rate by dentists for any oral hygiene product is every 3 months. You're supposed to change your toothbrush every 3 months. Not everyone does it, but you're supposed to change it every 3 months, because eventually like bacteria builds up and it can clog things and plaque and things. And like this has like little channels the water goes through, and things can build up inside over time, you know, minerals, and so which can interrupt the water flow. So, I mean, it's not expensive. It's like, you know, like $10 for a replacement head, but if you're replacing it 4 times a year, that's, you know, $40 of recurring revenue per user per year. We're also planning on launching which we haven't done yet. We're planning on launching a concentrated mouthwash that you could add to the reservoir, so that you could have like mouthwash at the same time as you floss your teeth. So that's an additional recurring revenue.
So you have built that recurring revenue into the model.
Yeah, and we also have a few other hygiene related products that in the pipeline that I'm not ready to talk about yet, but are in the same field, so that we can use our mailing list and use all our previous customers as an additional cross sale.
And can you get positive ROAS when you're running ads?
Oh yeah. It's very profitable. You know, especially with all the other aspects of it.
Very smart. And I think that's, I mean, like you again, you've nailed it. Like a lot of people that are just selling consumer goods products or whatnot, and they focus on the one-time sale. Yeah. That's where it's hard to be profitable. When you have that recurring revenue stream, all of a sudden
it makes it much more profitable. Yeah. And the head is the biggest profit margins. I mean,
1,000%.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot of recurring revenue from that.
How do you manage, we'll talk about the third business you have, but how do you manage multiple businesses? And for example, why would you not try and exit Singular Sound before raising, what was the name of the actual, sorry, I have it written, that's my bad. So it's Instafloss, sorry, excuse me. Why would you not exit Singular Sound before you raise for Instafloss?
Well, I am running Singular Sound. I'm the CEO of Singular Sound. And when we came up with the idea for, and I have multiple projects going with Singular Sound, multiple products that we're developing. So it's not like it's just coasting. Yeah. We're constantly developing. I have a development team that's working on new projects and new products. With Instafloss, the idea was because my brother He's not a musician, but he wanted to get into something more mass market. So he became the CEO of InstaFloss, and so he's taking the lead on that. And of course, we both help each other out with both businesses because we're both co-owners. But that's how we're doing it. He's the CEO of InstaFloss. And
That makes sense. And I think that's actually, I think there's so much, it's such a superpower to be able to build business with family because you solve for the trust factor immediately. And that is, if you've never built a business, that is like so underrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
As
I learned the hard way.
no, because like it doesn't even matter, not even business partners. It could be, it's not even like, let's make the assumption that most business partners don't want to fuck you over, even though they do. But let's make the assumption that they're still good people. It's like, you're human and you'll always have reservations about being super candid with people that are not your own family. And you cannot just explicitly trust them. And those two factors, like that radical candor and being able to trust that person with your life, it's like you just like hacked business because those two things kill more businesses than anything else.
I feel very fortunate.
Yeah.
I had a great relationship with all my siblings.
After this whole life of all these ups and downs and everything, with even like the work you went into, how did that affect the relationship with your family?
Well, so as I said, I have 8 siblings. There's 9 of us all together.
Including the parents in that too, though.
Yeah. So my parents, when we first started, like when we first won the contract, the $300 million contract, my parents were super proud of me, right? They're like, oh, he's going to be successful, And then, of course, when the New York Times published their article, they were a little less proud. My dad actually called me up and he's like, oh, I have a lot of my friends are calling me up asking me if I'm related to you. And I said, yeah, he's my son. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry. And so my dad was somewhat well known in the Jewish community. And we have a very uncommon last name. I've never met anyone with my last name that would not.
It's not a normal Jewish last.
It's not. Packouz is a Latvian name, actually, originally Latvian. But my ancestors from like 100 years ago came from like Latvia and Poland and Russia, and my family's been in the United States about 100 years. But yeah, our name is very uncommon. So when people saw it in the New York Times, they're like, he must be related to Rabbi Kalman Packouz, So he started getting calls from his friends all over the world, wishing him condolences, and so that did not go well. But then when, I launched the BeatBuddy, that was kind of like my redemption. I was like, I could build a legitimate business that, my dad could be proud of. And so that was really nice. And when the movie came out, my dad loved it because all his friends thought it was super cool that, that there's a movie about his son. And my mom refused to watch it. She still hasn't seen it. What she told me was, I don't need Hollywood to tell me about my son.
Oh my goodness. That sounds like a mom.
It sounds like acting. Exactly. My dad loved the movie except for one part, which I thought was hilarious. There's this one part in the movie where when Miles Teller and Jonah Hill like meet for the first time, like in the funeral, which is not how we actually met at Alex's house smoking weed, but in the they wanted to make it look cooler, so they had us meet at the funeral. And so there's this one line where like Jonah Hill tells Miles, he's like, I didn't have your number. I tried to get it from your mom, but she wouldn't give me your number. And Miles Teller goes, what, you're talking to my mom? And Jonah goes, yeah, man, I was fucking her.
I can see why your dad wouldn't like that line.
My dad goes, he's like, what he said about your mother is just, it wasn't funny.
I was like, I don't know why they thought it was that Orthodox Jewish rabbi. That's yes. Okay, so I get it.
Yeah, so that was the one part of the movie he didn't like. Everything else he thought was great. He loved the movie, but he didn't like that part.
So after all this, like, now you've like rebuilt that relationship.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think it's very important. Like, what's the point of building anything if you don't have family around? So now your brother manages and is CEO of InstaFloss. You CEO Singular Sound. You shared resources. Does other family involved or no?
So yeah, we have 3 other brothers who work in our company between the 2 companies. Yeah. Yeah.
So after these two companies, Singular Sound's been around for 10 years now. It's doing very well. Are you eventually going to sell, or are you?
I'm considering it sometime in the future.
Are you when you build, you don't build to sell?
No, I mean, like, look, if someone gives me a really good offer, I'll take it. I'm not like emotionally.
You're not seeking a private equity or strategic buyer.
Not yet, definitely not yet. I've got a few other, Grand Slam products that I'm waiting to come out with first, so to get that valuation up. So yeah, I'm not like actively seeking, but if someone came to me now and offered me I've got a number, but if someone gave me that number, I'd take it. But yeah, I'm not like in a rush to sell Singular Sound. I actually really love working in, this business.
Well, the reason why I think the first thing I said in this interview was like, you don't seem like an entrepreneur that would have gone into like arms dealing.
Right.
Because you really do seem like a very creative entrepreneur that has a business mind, but you do love like creative endeavors.
That's my favorite thing, is to create new things and because the arms business, for all its glamour, right, is really just logistics. That's really all it is. You buy from one place, you move it to another. There's no creativity there. I mean, you can get creative, but that's where you get in trouble, right? So, and government contracting is the same. People think government contracting and arms are the same thing. It's not. Government contracting is an enormous field. It covers every industry. As I said, like my first contract was for fuel. It was for propane. And I worked on contracts for food and for clothing and cars. And I did all sorts of stuff. We just happened to specialize in the arms business. And that's kind of, now people associate government contracting with the arms business. But overall, the government contracting field is a logistics field, right? You find the best possible price, you find the best possible logistics, you bid on a contract, you win it, you deliver, you collect the money. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's an enormous amount of business. I just personally enjoy a more creative aspect of the business. I like the blue ocean businesses, So like I like creating products that don't exist. I just enjoy that more. Yeah, I mean, that's why I got into, Singular Sound and InstaFloss, and I have like a spreadsheet of like 30 different ideas.
I have no doubt you do. I have no doubt you do. Is there anything, any lessons, any like business or entrepreneurial lessons that you did take from arms dealing that have helped you in InstaFloss and Singular Sound?
Well, I would say not necessarily from arms dealing as an industry, but from my experience doing that and it's going to be super cliche, but like I definitely learned the value of the grind and hard work. And I think a big source of why we were successful was that we outworked everybody else. Like we were really working our asses off. Like, it's not. In the movie, they kind of make it all glamorous and you get the montage, right? But you don't actually spend 18 hours, sending emails and going down like Google results and going through directories and calling people up and following up. And it's a grind, it's a grind. And you have to accept that if you want to be successful in that business. It's a grind. So I would say work ethic. Yeah, I'll talk a lot of shit about Efraim. Right. But one thing I admire about him is that he has an incredible work ethic. Right. He works I would say too much, to be honest. Like, I think he works to an unhealthy level. I think everyone needs to find the balance, right? Where you can work to what's necessary, the level that you need to work to be successful, but so that you don't burn yourself out. Because if you burn yourself out, you're not going to be successful over the long term. You need to find the maximum amount of work you can do on a regular basis. And that's different for everybody. And Efraim had an incredible work ethic. He did go in like kind of spurts, and like he'd work his ass off for like a week and then pass out for 3 days and like be unreachable, extremely unhealthy. And from people I know who still know him, he's still doing that. So it's extremely unhealthy. And I don't think it's not a good long-term strategy, like on a personal level for anybody. But he, one thing I always admired about him was that he could work his ass off, and he was willing to work harder than pretty much anyone else to an unhealthy level. And that's so like I learned that's a good thing, but there's definitely a limitation to that. And you need to be able to have balance in your life and take care of other aspects of your life. You are not your work, right? There are more things that go into making a human than just making money all day. And that's very important. But if you don't address the other aspects of your life, it's going to affect your business too.
It's
So
only a matter of time before
it's only a matter of time. So that's a big lesson that I learned, is that you have to work your ass off. There's no such thing as easy money. You know, everyone wants get rich quick, get rich easy. Almost never happens, right? It could happen. I'm not saying there are people who get lucky all the time, but like in the vast majority of the cases, it's going to be a slog and it's going to take you way longer than you thought, right? That's just how it is. Every product I've developed has taken me about, on average, 3 times longer than I thought it would,
and probably 3 times as much money.
Yes, that's
Not just time, but
not just time,
energy, resources.
exactly.
Look, you have no more hair.
Oh, I do. You know, I used to have beautiful hair, all that stress. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest lesson I took away from that is having to work hard and yet balance it. Because as I said, I learned a lot of things to do from Efraim, which is you have to work hard, but also what not to do is to be completely obsessed and have nothing else going on in your life except for that. And, you know, as well as other things that you shouldn't do.
A lot of other
things that you shouldn't do.
One thing that I'm a huge fan of, this concept that I'm a huge fan of is seasons of your life and understanding which season of your life that you're in. Because I do believe that for somebody to have large financial success or entrepreneurial success, there will be a season of your life where a portion of it maybe is working like Efraim and is work and yourself too, like not just him. And you're kind of like balls to the wall. You're putting everything into this thing that you're trying to build. But then you have to understand, okay, so maybe that's before I have kids or a wife or a family. And then I do have kids and a wife and a family. And if you carry that season into that next season, that's when you're going to be, there's going to be a lot of problems, and you could ruin your life like that. So I don't like the term like work-life balance. I do like work-life integration, but I also think that depending on the season of life that you're in, the scale should tip one way or the other. And I think that's a very healthy way to look at entrepreneurship. And when you're looking at your life and you're stressed about when you were getting like charged and sentenced, you're not stressed about, oh, I'm not going to be, of course it's underlying, I'm not going to be able to make money while I'm in jail. Right. But ultimately it's like, I have a family.
Yes.
And I think that that's a beautiful thing, and it takes the focus away from you. To focus on the family then.
That was like one of the biggest realizations I had when I was looking at decades in prison, is like, I might miss watching my kid grow up. You know, I've got like a little baby, and like when I come out, she could be an adult, you know, and not only will I miss out on my whole life, but I'll miss out on my kid's life. And there's really nothing that's worth that. You know, like you can make more money, you can never make more time. That's just how it is.
I think if people spent as much time figuring how to make money as they do trying to do shit the wrong way, I think they'd be very successful. I mean, if Efraim just focused on doing, and like even like your situation is like a very specific situation, but if you put that much energy and effort into almost any business,
anything, yeah,
you're gonna be pretty well off.
You know, he could just tweak a few things about his strategy if he just didn't fuck over every single person he came in contact with, I think he would be way more successful.
You know that I've heard, listen, I have a lot of friends now in Miami, and I have a lot of friends that have made quite a bit of money just through interviewing them, become friends with them, people that have had massive exits. And his reputation is not good in the city.
Yeah.
From other people, way before I met you. He's very interesting because, I mean, I don't care. I don't know the guy at all. But it does.
His reputation preceded it.
It really does. It really does.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild. And you have to be careful. The world is very small.
Yeah, absolutely.
The world is very, very small.
I'll give you one little anecdote that just really encapsulates his problem, I would say. I did another podcast called Inside True Crime, and it's
with
Matt Cox.
Yeah,
Matt Cox. Matt Cox. Matt Cox was in prison with Efraim. He met Efraim in prison.
Oh yeah.
Matt Cox wrote Ephraim's memoir. He was his ghostwriter. Now, half of his memoir is literally a work of fiction. Actually, there's a whole story behind Ephraim's memoir. It's called "Once a Gunrunner," from the line he used when he got arrested. But there's it's a semi-entertaining book, extremely self-aggrandizing and egotistical. One of the first lines in the book, he describes himself, because he's like supposedly the author of the book, right? He's Efraim Diveroli, who is handsome by anyone's standards. You know, like it's like unbelievable.
A line in the book?
It's a line in the book. He also claims that all the prostitutes he slept with ended up falling in love with him and refused his money. And, it's completely unbelievable and ridiculous. Yeah, I know. It's hilarious. And also Matt Efraim was using that book as a way to sue Warner Brothers for like stealing his story. So he was trying to get his book out before the movie was published, and Matt didn't have enough time to finish the book. So
But Matt was in jail.
yeah, Matt was.
Then he was out.
Matt eventually got out. Yeah, but
No, I know.
while he was writing the
Like,
book,
how can you publish a book?
so he was using, I think the jail had like a computer like time or something, and he had to like, it was a big pain in the butt obviously to get it out, but he managed to write the book in jail. But he didn't have enough time to finish the book the right way, so Efraim, who wanted to get the book out before the movie came out, said, oh, just like take one of your other unpublished works of fiction and combine it with this so he took like literally a novel he wrote that was completely fictional and just changed some of the names and combined it into Efraim's memoir. This is what Matt told me. And so like literally Efraim's memoir is is literally a work of fiction. And even the parts that were based on true story, that I know of, like he changed things around completely to make himself look way better.
Matt Cox was like, whatever, I don't care, I'll publish it anyways.
Yeah, so he didn't want to, but Efraim insisted. And so anyway, while Matt was writing, this is the part that I want to tell you about. While Matt was writing Efraim's memoir, and Efraim was telling him all the stories, he's like, oh, and then I screwed this guy in this way, and then he was very proud of all these, like ways he pulled, he screwed all these people out. He thought it made him look smart, like I outwitted this guy in this way, and then I screwed over that guy in that way.
Asshole.
Yeah, and so Matt told, after like the seventh, eighth story in this similar fashion, Matt looks at Efraim and he's like, Efraim, you can't really just keep on like burning all your bridges, man. And Efraim looked at him and he says, Matt, there's a lot of bridges out there. And Matt told me, he's like, and that's the moment I knew he was going to screw me over too. And he did. He did. He screwed Matt out of every penny he promised him for writing his book. Of course he did.
He just can't. He can't stop.
He can't stop. Even if it's small, he can't stop. It doesn't matter how small the money is.
But that is to your point.
Yeah.
Like that's like a sociopathic.
It's a sociopathic thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like this is like he was consciously doing it, but that's not a normal way to react.
No, he's not a normal person. I mean, So yeah. I mean, I think that kind of encapsulates his problem. Like if he didn't have to burn every bridge, he would be way more successful because people would keep on doing business.
He probably is smart and does have work ethic.
Smart. He does. Like,
and he doesn't go on interviews or
no, he doesn't want to because I assume because he doesn't want people recognizing him in public. And he also keeps where he lives a secret because a lot of people try to sue him and he tries to avoid getting served and all that stuff.
There's not a good life to live.
No, always looking over your shoulder.
Are you ever worried that, I mean, you speak about him.
I talk shit about him all day. Yeah. I'm not worried. I'm not scared of him.
You don't think he's going to sue you?
Sue me? What's he going to sue me over, Saying the truth?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not worried about it. I mean, he could sue me. He's the king of frivolous lawsuits.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be tied up in that because then you're.
No, I don't. But I'm not going to prevent myself from telling the truth over that either. I'm not scared of him. I mean, look, if he sues me, I'll counter sue him. Maybe I'll actually get some money out of him finally. Whatever. Like luckily I'm in a good position in life now, and I'm not like completely defenseless like I was back then. I'm not gonna be desperate, or anything to get rid of him. If he wants to sue me, I'll sue him right back. So fuck him. I don't care. But I'm definitely not gonna hold myself back from saying the truth and telling the story and everything like that.
I didn't know all these parts of the story. This is absolutely phenomenal in the worst way possible. Like I don't. I'll just say it.
Yeah.
Jonah Hill did him.
Yeah, I think he did him a service. I think he made him a lot more likable.
Did you ever ask him why he screwed you over?
So Matt asked him. Matt Cox asked Efraim, why did you screw over Packouz? And Efraim told him. He said, Matt told me this, while I was on his podcast, and he said, Efraim told me, he's like, at first I thought that the deal I made with Packouz was a good deal because, if we don't make any money, then he doesn't get anything, no risk on my end. And if we make money, yeah, he gets a commission, but he only gets that if we're actually making money. So it's only a net positive. But after we won the contract, I realized, man, I'm going to have to pay millions of dollars to Packouz, and I could hire someone else to do this for less than $100K a year. So why should I pay Packouz millions of dollars when I could have someone
not a reason to screw someone?
Well, in his mind, it was. So pretty much the reason was he didn't want to pay me.
That's the reason.
That's the reason. Yeah.
There was no bad blood.
No,
He didn't think you did anything wrong.
no.
He's just like, well, I have two options:
Yeah.
pay him or not, and I'd rather go with the not pay option.
Make more money if I don't pay him. That was his reason. Yeah.
He'll never be
Yeah.
successful.
No.
He'll never be successful.
No.
That's insane.
He'll never build anything long term. I'm sure he can screw people, and he has screwed people over, on deals and made money in the short term. But he's never going to build a long term business, because to do that, you need to actually build partnerships that work for more than just yourself. Yeah.
Who cares about $4 million
Yeah.
when you have the up and you're winning $300 million
Yeah.
contracts?
Yeah. And we could have won more contracts.
The
there.
short-sightedness
Yeah.
is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yep.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It blows my mind too.
It doesn't make any sense when you like hearing it.
Yeah.
I'm like you had a great business.
Absolutely.
Outside of the fact that, and I would be fucking furious if I God forbid, get sent to jail and lost tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars over 20 grand.
Yeah.
Like, I'm mad for you.
Yeah. Oh, I was pretty mad myself. Yeah, it was just unbelievable. I would have paid the guy myself the 20 grand, but
I'm about to pay this guy 20 grand.
yeah. I was actually seriously considering it at the time, but at the time I was down to my last 30 grand, and I was like, I'm not going to give the guy, out of my pocket, almost all of the money I have left. So yeah, in retrospect, maybe I should have, but then again, he wouldn't have paid me anyway. So, I would have had to chase him, and yeah, it was not a good thing.
That's too bad. That's very, it was a great movie, but in real life, it's kind of a sad.
Yeah. But, I am personally very grateful for where I am now.
You wouldn't change anything.
I wouldn't change anything, because you don't know, you can't A/B test the universe, as they say, you can't, yeah, if we had done something, if we had paid the box guy, right, we would have gone on. Maybe at that point he would have tried to screw the mafia over directly, and maybe we would have end up dead in mysterious circumstances. It could have happened. Very easily could have happened. He was so close to doing that, while he was in Albania. He tried to, but then, they weren't having it. They saw right through him. He tried to show them fake documents, and yeah, he doctored a whole bunch of quotes, and he's like, you have to give me a better price because these guys are going to, they're like, yeah, those documents are fake. Don't show me those fake documents, the mob, And so, yeah, I mean, he, who knows what would have happened. I'm very happy with where I am today. I'm working with my family members. I'm building businesses I'm proud of, actually creating products that people really value, bringing value. Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with brokering businesses. You are bringing value by providing a service for less money, but it's just, for me, it's fulfilling. And it's one of the most, we haven't talked about it much.
But I want to talk about.
Yeah. So my latest business, which literally just started a few months ago, and I'll tell you how this came about. Ever since the movie came out, I've had a lot of people contact me on social media, pretty much begging me to teach them how to do government contracting. And I was banned from doing it for 15 years.
You're still banned?
No, I just got off the ban list literally last year. But I hadn't done it in 15 years. And of course, I figured maybe they changed some of the rules, some of the procedures. And so I wasn't going to teach people how to do this. I figured my knowledge was a bit out of date. And anyway, I was busy building Singular Sound and InstaFloss. And so it's not like I had time to teach people this stuff anyway. So but then about a year ago, I had this guy named Logan. He contacted me out of the blue. I think it was on Instagram. And he told me, send me a message. He's like, hey, just want you to know that about 6 years ago, my partner James and I, we were 21 years old, and we were dead broke, working on a farm in Australia, picking bananas. just because they had run out of money after traveling in Thailand, and they were going to save some money to continue traveling. And they were picking bananas on a farm, literally dead broke. And the farm had a movie night, and they showed War Dogs. And they thought to themselves, man, these guys are our age. They're 21, 22. If they could do it, why can't we do it? Yeah. And so they got obsessed with it. They learned how to do the business. They bid on a whole bunch of things. They managed to win like a small laundry services contract. And then they won a bigger laundry services contract and a bigger one. And then 6 years later, they have a multi-million-dollar business specializing in laundry services, providing it to like military bases all over the world. They're flying to like Europe and taking care of contracts in Germany. They're very successful now. And they just reached out to me to say thank you, for the inspiration. They're like, without War Dogs, we would have never done this. And so I thought, these guys currently have multi-million-dollar contracts. They're bidding on new contracts. They're as up to date as you can be about government contracting. So I told them, like, hey guys, first of all, I'm super inspired that you guys taught yourself the business. Not many people can do that. It's not a simple business. It's complex. It's not hard, but it's complicated, especially when you're learning from scratch. Much easier when someone else is teaching you, as I had with Efraim and Efraim had with his uncle. So I said I was very impressed with these guys that they taught themselves the business. And so I said, why don't we, I have literally hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people in my DMs asking me to teach them this. Why don't we start a course to teach people how to do this? And so that's how we launched War Dogs Academy. It's an online course, step-by-step guide, video format, as well as written. We have like a textbook that goes with it, but you could do everything in video. And we also have a community, like a forum, where all the students can make business connections with each other, and interact with us, with the founders, and ask us questions. Every week we have twice a week live question and answer sessions. So anyone who has any questions, they can ask questions and listen to other people's questions and learn that way. And we hired, I think one of the biggest value adds for the community is we hired a couple of retired contracting officers, people who used to work for the government deciding who wins the contracts. Now they work for us, and they coach our students. They review their proposals before they submit it to the government to make sure they're not missing anything. They answer any questions they don't understand. And because of that, actually just in the last few months, we've had over 50 students win their first federal contracts.
That's amazing.
Some of them in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And this is like pure, like starting to build a business from scratch.
Scratch. Yeah, scratch. And a thing that we're really excited about, we also made a deal with a financing company to finance our students' federal contracts. So one of the big limitations in government contracting is that the government pays you 30 days later after you deliver, which means you need to float that financing. If you're buying from most suppliers will require you to pay up front before they ship, and then you have to pay the logistics company to ship it, and then you have to wait 30 days after you deliver. Big cash flow issue, and most entrepreneurs who are just starting out don't have that money. And so, but the good thing from an investor's point of view is that federal contracts are as safe as it comes, right? Because the government is not going to run out of money. They print the money, and they're not going to screw you, because the contracting officer isn't going to make a penny more if he screws you out of the money, right?
No, and it's guaranteed against the purchase order. So,
exactly, yeah. Guaranteed. So as long as you deliver what the contract tells you to deliver, you're 100% going to get paid. Unlike in the private sector, where you have these nefarious actors who will try to screw you over and make more money, and you have to sue them, and all that stuff. So we made a deal with a financing company to finance our students' contract, and we get a little percentage of that, So we have
it's a good business.
It's a great business, and so we're very motivated to make sure our students succeed, because the more money they make, the more money we're going to make. And so it's really, really gratifying, that now when people contact me on social media, they're like, please teach me how to do the business, I can actually teach them.
That is all you need to do.
Exactly.
This is government contract procurement, like
exactly.
In a box.
Exactly. It's turnkey solution.
What is like the biggest thing that people screw up if they're trying to get into this business?
I think that one of the biggest things is that they don't read the solicitations closely, because the solicitations are long, right?
This is what the government posts.
Exactly.
This is like it's the RFP?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So when the government wants to buy something, they are required by law to post it on their public website, sam.gov, right? Anyone can access it and look it up. And they have the documents there, and most of the documents are like 30 pages long, right? And they refer to a whole bunch of other rules that you have to go look up, right? And so it's kind of a slog to go through it. So the the tendency for people when they're just starting out is to kind of just like, not read the whole thing, or if they don't understand something, kind of skip over it. And that will, oftentimes people will make critical mistakes. They won't supply a critical document that the government requires, or they won't look at a particular rule. And there's lots of rules for everything, just to give you an example, like when the government buys clothing, they usually have a rule that a certain amount of the fabric needs to be grown in the United States, and a certain amount of the assembly needs to be done, certain percentages. And you have to, when you get quotes from your suppliers, you have to make sure they follow all those things. When it's transported, it has to be transported on, if it's like between two American ports, it needs to be on an American vessel. It's like the Jones Act, So there's a lot of these rules that have built up over like 100 years of government contract.
You got to know them all.
You got to know them all, and that's why our retired government contracting officers are such an incredible resource to our students, because they know all this stuff, and they'll like review our students' proposal, and they'll be like, "Oh, you missed this thing, or did you make sure to look up that thing?"
They know the rules.
They know all the rules. They've been doing it for like decades,
Yeah.
and so. And I think that's why so many of our students have won contracts so far, is because they've had that support.
What would be the difference between starting this kind of business versus anything else that you started? Anything like who's the person that goes into government contracting as a business? What are like the nuances for that kind of person?
So government contracting, I think you're going to do well in government contracting if you can, if you're willing to grind. I always tell people government contracting is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not a get-rich-easy scheme. It is a get-rich scheme, right? You could get rich, and a lot of people do. And we already have had students who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, in business that have gone through our program. They started from zero, right? So they are already well on their way to getting quite wealthy from this. So it is very possible, and it's doable, but you have to be willing to grind, and you have to be willing to be meticulous in your details, be very conscientious, right? That's one of the most important things. And be willing to keep on going when you lose, right? Because you're going to lose a whole bunch usually before you win. We've had a few students who won the first contract they bid, quite a few, a surprising amount. Actually,
You have the framework.
yeah, exactly. But we have had a few students who submitted 15 bids, lost them all, and won the 16th. And that 16th one made them so much money that they're like, oh, it just made all that other work that went for nothing worth it, because we made so much money on this. So you have to be willing to deal with that kind of dynamic, and that's not for everybody. A lot of people, they want to put in their hours, they want to get a straight paycheck, something solid. That's not this business. If you're going into this business, you have to be willing to like not make any money for months at a time until you hit that big payday, right? My partners actually, they told me a story that they actually were doing really well for like the first year or two. And then they hit like a dry spell of like 6 months where they did not win a single contract. Even though they submitted a lot of bids, they didn't win a single contract. And they're like, oh my God, maybe our run of good luck is over. Maybe we should get out of this business. And then they won the biggest contract they'd ever won.
It's a very like tumultuous.
It's a tumultuous business. And you have to make your peace with that. And if you're okay with that kind of business, and you're willing to do that kind of work, then this is for you, and you can make a lot of money doing it. And the good thing about this business is that, well, first of all, the complexity keeps a lot of competitors out, right? There's a lot of companies in the private sphere that don't want to deal with government contracting. That's why there's the room for the middlemen, right? It's actually surprisingly some large companies that don't want to even sell to the government because they don't want to deal with, all the rules and all the paperwork and the financing and all.
Well, like even if you're a private company and you have resources, like the resources you have access to are not like, for example, the officers that worked in the government. Like that, like you got to go find out how to hire somebody, make sure they're not full of shit, and make sure they're good at what they do. And then once you find that talent, then you can, and it's like almost like it's just like shiny object syndrome. You're just like we're already, everything over here is working. We have a process over here. Why do we want to mess with that? Because it's a whole other, it's like, I think it's probably more of a mental hurdle than anything else. but mental hurdles are real.
Yeah.
And the company doesn't want to get into
They
it.
stop people from doing it.
Yeah.
We're actually just started a B2B service for companies who have the resources and they just want a turnkey solution. So we have we're just getting that off the ground. We've actually had quite a few relatively mid-sized to large companies contact us who they don't want to like spend months training one of their employees to do this. They're like, just get us registered, find out what we're eligible, do the bidding for us, fill out all the proposals.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's going to be a whole other element of War Dogs Academy now.
Very, very. When for War Dogs Academy, like I think that when people get into this kind of business, they're always looking for maybe like a unique edge or a certain category that may be more lucrative than others. Is there something, is that the case? Are some things more lucrative than others? Like, should they be looking at munitions or laundry or food or medical?
You can make millions of dollars doing any of those things, and people have.
There's not one that stands out?
So I would say that I couldn't tell you that one particular industry is more lucrative or has higher margins than another, right? Because all it takes is one competitor to underbid you, right? So when people, one of the most common questions we get is what to specialize in, right? And I tell people, if you already have a specialty, like if you've worked in a particular field, then try that first, right? Like if you know the laundry business, bid on laundry contracts. If you know the food business, bid on food contracts, because you're already a leg up, right? You know some details of the business. You may have connections for sources. You know the potential hurdles, like with logistics or the rules that you may need to face. Every single industry has its own quirks, right? So if you have a specialty, just start with that. If you don't have a specialty, just throw a lot of things at the wall and see what sticks. That's what most people do. Obviously you have to identify the things that you have a chance of winning, and we do that in the course, is to identify, because you're not qualified to bid on everything as a beginner. You need certain contracts, you need a certain amount of past performance or certain licenses, and so we teach people how to identify contracts that they have a chance of winning. And once you bid on a few of those, if you bid on enough of them and stick through it, and as I said, some of our students had to bid on 16 contracts before they won one. They won the 16th. So I admire them greatly for sticking it through, because that's a lot of no's. That's a lot of failures to get through.
Yeah, but that's required to learn.
It's required to learn.
Yeah.
And but if you're willing to do that, you could succeed in any industry. And we've had students succeed. We had one student deliver ice baths to an army base because they wanted
So
that.
things that you wouldn't even have thought.
Some things you would never even have thought of. We had another student deliver drones. Another student delivered hypnotherapy services. They literally buy everything. The government buys everything. Another one did janitorial services. Another one did landscaping services. So they buy literally everything.
Do you feel like there's a lot of waste in the government?
I mean, there's a lot of waste in any large organization. I would say that the main thing, and there's of course all the horror stories of like NASA paid $2 million for this pen.
I think Canada paid like $100 million for some COVID app.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal because this app was like garbage.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure it was like a 2-person company that got this contract that then offshored it all. So it was a scandal. But
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely waste in any government system.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to do is, of course, any system could be improved, right? I think the most important thing is that you need to set up the framework for the system to be efficient, or as efficient as it can be. So the system the United States has, for example, where it's like a blind bidding system, right? Anyone who wants to win these contracts has to submit their best offer, and the government is required by law not to tell anyone what your competitors are bidding, or if you even have any competitors. You could be the only person bidding on that contract, and the government's not allowed to tell you that. And if you knew that, you would put your prices way up, right? And that's why they're not allowed to tell you that. It's illegal for them to tell you that. And I think those kind of rules prevent a lot of waste. I'm not saying that there isn't waste, and there's been plenty of situations in the past, infamously like with Halliburton, that they won a multi-billion-dollar contracts without a single other competitor even like competing.
Yeah.
It was a no-bid contract, which should be illegal. And I don't even know why it might have been. I don't even know what the legality of that whole situation.
Well, I know private, like, because in private industry, if you're like a Fortune 1000, you got to get 3 bids. You have 3 responses to an RFP, or you invalidate the RFP, or you shop it around to other companies that don't know about it yet. Like, you got to, like, so it should be the case. And
it should be. And I think they changed some of the rules after that whole scandal, after the Halliburton scandal. So that's not to say that they fixed all the problems. I'm sure there's still plenty of waste going on, but I think you have to compare it to other countries, right? So like, infamously, Russia has a very corrupt procurement system, and we saw that on display in the beginning of the Ukraine war, where all their tires were popping in that convoy because someone in their procurement system bought cheap Chinese tires that were not mil spec, and they failed in the field, and they probably because that guy was pocketing a few $1 million, and that their system's kind of built on corruption as like an endemic systemic issue. And that's why they've had so many problems. So I'm not saying that we should be comparing ourselves to Russia. We're a very different kind of country, but there are ways of building the system to minimize the corruption. Now, you're never going to get rid of corruption. You're never going to get rid of waste 100%. All you could do is try to set up the system so that it has the highest chance of minimizing that. And I think the United States, for all its flaws and for all the bad press that all the bad situations get, by and large is a relatively well-run system. That's my opinion. I'm sure the people in the YouTube comments are going to be very, very strongly disagree with me. And
I think you're right, but I think that when you benchmark it against other countries, I think that it's not. Listen, at the end of the day, like capitalism, democracy was always supposed to be the best of the worst.
Right.
That was always what it was supposed to be, right? Like, listen, this is always an experiment, so we're trying to figure it out.
Right. It's the worst form of government except for all the other ones.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Winston Churchill, I think.
So we'll put everything in the show notes as well as to like where to send people. But just like maybe like one last word of wisdom just for like War Dogs Academy, if somebody does want to get into this. Tell them where to go for the academy, but also just other like words of wisdom if they want to start things to think about in contracting.
Yeah. Well, if anyone who's interested in War Dogs Academy, go to wardogsacademy.com. Well, yeah, easy enough, easy to remember. And we also are on Instagram and all that, all the major social media channels. We've got lots of memes. Good. Yeah, exactly. Got to do the memes. People love the memes. Apparently, it's so funny. Like we'll publish a meme and it'll get like 100,000 views, and then there's like a clip of me on a podcast, 10,000 views.
Yeah, you listen, dude.
It's okay. I'm not too insulted.
No, I deal with this every single day. I'm like, I'm trying to put out like really smart, informative content. You're trying to like help educate you and improve your life and teach you things, and then like whatever.
Yeah, it kind of fizzles.
Yeah,
and then you do some stupid thing that's even slightly funny, and then it just like takes off. It's just the way the algorithm works, So yeah, it's fine. Yeah, but we try to mix. We do a mix. You got to do a mix. Give people, because different people are just discovering it for the first time. The memes are good for that, and then as they dive in and kind of get more serious, they get a little more educated. So wardogsacademy.com. Same thing on all social media, War Dogs Academy. And I would say that if you want to be successful, first of all, I would say government contracting is a great business, right? As even though I personally prefer businesses that have a little bit more creativity in them, like inventing products and things like that. And that's my preference. There's nothing wrong with doing a competitive business like government contracting, and there's quite a few advantages to it. So
I think there's more. There's more advantages than
I would say there too,
because
it's less risky,
much less risky.
Yeah,
government always pays. They're a great customer.
Exactly.
Brainstorming and inventing a product.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's very hard.
It's very hard. High rates of failure. The good thing about government contracting is that the business will never run out, and even when the economy, and especially when the economy is in the shitter, And when there's a big crisis, while everyone else is shutting down, the government ramps up their spending. Like with COVID, everyone was shutting down, everyone was getting laid off, but the government really turned on the money printer there and spent more money than ever in history. And where does that money go? Through the government contracting system. So the government contracting business is not only recession proof, it actually benefits from recession and crises. You make more money in those times. So there is enormous advantages to government contracting. Keeps the complexity, may be annoying to deal with, when you're first starting out, but the more complex it is, the less competition you have. So there's that advantage. That's another advantage of government contracting. Anyone, I do believe, not anyone, a lot of people can teach themselves how to do this, as my partners did, but it is a complex business, especially to start out with, and you will save a lot of time and you'll avoid a lot of mistakes if you have someone
You're
who knows.
compressing time by going through your academy, for sure.
So
1,000%.
You'll make a lot more money a lot sooner by investing in that. So I think it's in fact, we've been debating about whether we're charging too low.
I'm just thinking about it. Like if I because the opportunity to make money in government contracting is so significant that one deal could be a significant lump sum of hundreds of thousands, if not.
We've had a few students win those.
But if I think about like one thing that I would want to compress time on, and like even having access to like an officer that's worked in government before, like I don't have budget for a salary for that person day zero. So that does seem like a really smart. Yeah, it seems like a very smart way to spend money, in my opinion, at least. Listen,
My opinion.
I guess so. I've interviewed a lot of people that have courses, and some are more useful than others.
Right.
But I can see this being quite useful.
Yeah. And it has been. And I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say, that we've had so many students already win their first contracts. And I told my partners in War Dogs Academy, I told them when we first had this idea and we were thinking about getting it started, I told them, I'm like, guys, I already have a felony conviction. This has to be real. This can't be a scam. The judge isn't going to go easy on me the second time around. So we have to build a real business that provides real value and that really helps. This can't be a flash in the pan. It can't be a scam. And we worked really hard to do that. And we've been iterating on the course as well. Like as our students have gone through the course and there's been issues where they didn't understand certain things or there was certain things that were missing. And we've iterated on that and filled in the gaps to me, because as I said, the more our students make money, the more we make money, through the financing and as well as the reputation.
All the incentives are aligned.
Our incentives are aligned. And so it's, to me, it's like, it's super gratifying because like I kind of turned this period of my life that turned out to be a bit of a disaster for me, though I did get a movie out of it, which is super cool.
Good lessons.
And I got good lessons and it ended up being inspiration for my first invention. So I'm not like, I don't regret, the way it turned out. I'm happy with where I ended up. But honestly, I was kind of allergic to government contracting after that. I was just like kind of like traumatized a little. And I was like, I don't want to do this business ever again. And to be able to build something that can actually teach people how to be successful and actually watch our students be successful. And some of our students, I mean, a lot of them are coming from nothing. They are coming, like, we've seen the stories, like they're, we've interviewed a lot of our students who've won the contracts, and we're of course using that on our social media. And a lot of them, like, they're dead broke, they're working jobs they hate, just looking for an opportunity and being able to provide something where they could actually make that happen for themselves and be proud of the work they did it. And, they did and get out of that job they hate and actually build a future for their families and, and be able to be, proud of what they're building is just super gratifying.
Entrepreneurship is so beautiful.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I'm like, it's super gratifying.
It's a nice use of your lived experience.
Exactly. So it kind of feels like I've come like a full circle in a way.
I feel that. I do feel that. I mean, what you went through, again, hopefully no one else has to go through that
And we advise our students do everything legally.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, it is a very legitimate business. It's a very niche business. Not a lot of people understand it. And I think an incredible way to become an entrepreneur, because again, you are selling to the best customer in the world, and all the other BS, biggest customer, best customer, most well-financed customer. And if you want to try other businesses, I mean, be my guest, because I've definitely done them, as have you. But there's a lot of other things that you're gonna have to figure out. And like, listen, this is why I think that I was, like, when you put together this academy, and I was very interested in bringing you on, mostly just to speak about how you take like your life experience and then copy and paste it across other students. Because I'm actually a very good example of somebody. I'm not an idiot, but I've always looked at government contracting and I'm like, this is so fascinating. But then I'll go to like sam.gov and I'll be like, oh, fuck this. Like,
It's most people, yeah. Like, I have enough stuff to figure out in my life. Yeah. It's difficult to learn.
It's overwhelming. It is very overwhelming.
It is. And I think that's why we put so much emphasis on like breaking it into digestible chunks. We also have like little tests you could take to make sure you absorbed it, like as you're going through the course. And the course is, I would say it's about 18 hours of material.
But then the community is really the value add.
The community is really where you cement all that learning.
Yeah.
And it's some of our students, they go through the course in like just a few days, and then they start bidding on contracts, and then they attend the live events, the question and answers, they learn even more on top of that, and they work out all the details. Some people take a few weeks to go through the course, so people learn at their own paces. But really what it comes down to is you learn by doing, and the course will give you a great foundation, and the community is going to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. You're not making the obvious mistakes that will cost you a lot of wasted time and effort.
What other places do you want to send people? Your social, whatever?
Yeah, well, if anyone's interested in my social life, I'm David Packouz on all social media platforms except for TikTok, which is funny. Nobody uses TikTok. I don't really use it that much either. But it's David M. Packouz on TikTok. Yeah, I would say mostly Instagram and YouTube. Is I'm on there. But yeah, so for my personal social media handles, David Packouz, Packouz, and there's warddogsacademy.com, instafloss.com. Tell your friends. Get one for your mother, right? And for the musicians in the audience, singularsound.com.
Perfect. Last question I always like to ask. Obviously, you've gone through a very interesting life. If you go back and tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would that be?
It'll work out.
I like that.
Don't stress too much.